Story 1. Wife cheated on me with my stepbrother and got pregnant, so when I asked for a paternity test she aborted the baby. So I told her parents everything, who later cut her off from her inheritance. I, 34M, have been married to my wife, 29F, for 2 years. Our relationship has been pretty standard. We met at a work event many years ago. We were friends for a couple of years before realizing we both had feelings for each other and started going out. We dated for 3 years before I asked her to marry me, so we have been together for almost 6 years now. We never really had any complications either in our dating phase or after being married. She is beautiful, smart, and a great partner to me. I have tried my best to be a good husband to her and we have been happy together. Around 6 months ago, my stepbrother, Darren, 28M, got fired from his job. Instead of looking for another job, he decided to take some time off to travel and find himself. Darren has always been sort of unpredictable and spontaneous. It took my dad and mom a lot to convince him to even go to college and get a degree. He always has crazy ideas that he has to be talked down from, but getting fired from his job because of being intoxicated during a work meeting is a big deal. Despite his history, he decided to stop drinking as well, and even though I was afraid this was just another thing he would pursue halfway through and quit, I tried to be supportive for my dad's sake. My parents got divorced when I was a kid and my dad married Darren's mom when I was a teenager, so when he asked if he could crash at my place for a few weeks because he wanted to explore New York, I didn't really know how to say no. I was skeptical and not really willing to do it, but my dad and stepmom asked me to let him stay, and I couldn't say no. I asked my wife and she said she was okay with it, so I reluctantly gave in. He came to live with us 2 months ago. I made it clear that he couldn't bring any people into the apartment, and even though he could leave and come back whenever he wanted, it shouldn't disrupt our sleep at all. He was surprisingly okay with all my rules. For the first few days he stayed out almost all night, and I even saw him come in as late as 7 a.m. While I was already up and getting ready for work. Apart from that, he was quite nice, had dinner with me and my wife at our place, and even cooked for us a few times. I was pleasantly surprised. This was not the Darren I had known all my life. My wife and I had planned a weekend trip to Vegas the second weekend he was there, as I had some work there. We told Darren to take care of the place till we were back. Everything was decided, but at the last minute my wife caught the bad stomach flu that was Thursday night, and we were supposed to leave the next morning. We were both really upset, but still thought she would go if she felt any better in the morning. Unfortunately, though, it only seemed to get worse, and by the time we were supposed to leave, she was too sick to go. I tried to reschedule my work thing and postpone our trip, but it was too last minute and I had to go. I felt awful about leaving her in her condition, but I knew that at least Darren would be there in case her health got worse. He promised to stay in and make her home-cooked meals as well. I promised to be back Saturday morning as early as I could and left. Looking back, I can't believe I didn't see what happened coming. So I went to Vegas by myself, got back the next day and saw that my wife was feeling better. I didn't think anything much of it, but after that weekend I noticed that Darren was home more often than before. Earlier he used to go out every day, but didn't go out for many days on a stretch. I asked him if everything was fine, and he just shrugged it away, saying he was just trying to conserve his savings. I didn't think much of it, but then I started noticing other things that started to stand out to me. I came back from work one day and saw that my wife was already home. Apparently she took half a day off from work because she had a headache, and forgot to tell me. Another time, I was home early from work and Darren and my wife entered the house together. Apparently they had just met outside the building. This could have been a coincidence, but I had a bad feeling about it. I had never doubted my wife's faithfulness, and even though Darren was a messy person, I didn't think he could do something as awful as that, but I just could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. I knew I couldn't accuse them of something out of nowhere. Not only did I not have any proof, but it would cause an insane amount of chaos in my family that I just did not want to deal with. So I did the simplest thing possible. I asked Darren how long he was planning to stay with us. I told him that it was great having him around, but maybe he should start thinking of his next steps. Thankfully, he took the hint and said that he would be moving out within the week. My wife was in the room while I had this conversation and she just kept quiet, didn't say a single word. I did not like that. Anyway, Darren moved out, and I tried not to think of all my doubts and focus on my marriage, instead of thinking of the worst-case scenario. Once Darren moved out, things were good, and I almost started to believe that I was just being paranoid and nothing of that sort was going on. I was embarrassed to think my wife would do something like that when she has been the perfect partner to me all these years. But then something happened. Around 2 weeks ago, we found out that my wife was pregnant. 2 months pregnant to be precise. You can probably see where this is going. 2 months ago, Darren was living with us. I felt sick to my stomach. I'll give you some context. I am a few years older than my wife. As I have already mentioned, I was ready to settle down and start a family of my own by the time I was 30. When my wife and I started dating, I knew right away she was the one for me and I wanted to marry her, but she felt like she was too young to have kids and wanted to wait a few years before taking that step. I supported her decision, even though this was not what I wanted. We decided to wait till she was 30 to start trying for kids, so we always use protection. My wife isn't on any pills because her body reacts badly to hormonal birth control. So she always insists on us to be extra careful, and I always use protection. Of course, accidents don't happen, but I just could not get over the fact that there was something wrong. The timing was just disturbing to me. She said she wanted to keep the baby. She said that even though this was unplanned, it was a good thing and we should be happy about this. I have wanted kids for a long time, so under different circumstances I would be on cloud 9, but I was in total agony. I tried to look happy in front of my wife, but I don't think I have ever felt worse. I did not know what to do. I could not talk to any of my friends about it because I didn't want anyone to judge me, but I just could not shake the negative thoughts and feelings away. After around a week of living in complete agony, I realized I couldn't just live like that. I had to confront my wife. I knew that this could have a disastrous impact on our marriage, and if I ended up being wrong, she might never forgive me, but I kept thinking of the worst, and the possibility of her being pregnant with my own stepbrother's baby was nauseating. We went to our first checkup and we got some blood work and tests done, but all I could feel was a sense of complete devastation. I couldn't bear it, so I prepared myself for the worst and decided to talk to her. Around a week ago, while having dinner, I told her that I had to talk to her about something very important. She wanted to know right away. I was terrified, but tried to be as direct as possible. I told her that I was sorry for feeling this way, but asked her if it really was my baby she was pregnant with. She seemed shocked at my question. Her whole face turned red and she started screaming about how I was a monster for accusing her of something so awful and how she has always been faithful to me. She asked me where all this was even coming from, and I told her that it was just too much of a coincidence that she was 2 months pregnant after it had been 2 months since Darren left. This made her even angrier and she started shouting even more. I could see that this was becoming ugly and tried my best to calm her down and make her listen to me. I explained to her that it was painful for me to live with these doubts, and I wished I didn't have them, and told her about the things that happened during Darren's stay that made me think that something was wrong. She seemed to calm down a bit and told me that she understood that I had doubts, but I needed to trust her and in our marriage. I felt terrible, but I told her that I wished I could just erase these thoughts. I had tried, and if there was really nothing to worry about, I wanted a paternity test after the baby was born. I even apologized to her and told her that I understood this must be difficult for her, but I had to be sure for my own sanity. Obviously, I didn't expect her to be completely okay with this and lash out a bit, but the reaction she had was insane. If she was agitated before, the mention of a paternity test made her go ballistic. She told me that I was cruel, and she couldn't believe that I would make her go through something so humiliating over my crazy thoughts. I tried to keep calm, but honestly, seeing her be so against it just made me feel like my doubts were true, and I was getting angry. I told her that this was an ultimatum, and if she didn't agree with it, I don't think we can be together. This seemed to calm her down a bit, and she said she needed time to think about it. We slept in separate rooms that night. The next morning, we didn't say a word to each other and went to work. I spent the whole day at work thinking about what happened and imagining the worst-case scenario to be the truth. The rest of the week was spent like that. She would come back late at night and refuse to speak to me. Every single time I tried to talk to her, she would get really agitated, so I stopped. I didn't know that she was just planning her next move. Last Thursday, I woke up in the morning and realized that she didn't come home last night. I texted her several times, but she wouldn't get back to me. I had to go to work, but was so upset that I could not continue working and went home early. I spent hours waiting for her to come home, but when she didn't turn up past 9 o'clock and still wouldn't answer my calls, I got extremely worried about her. I didn't know what else to do, so I called up her assistant at work to ask about her. To my surprise, I was told that she had taken 2 personal days and hadn't been to work. Her assistant seemed surprised that I didn't know about this. I was extremely worried at that point and called up a few of her friends to ask if she was with any of them. When all of them said that they hadn't heard from her, I started imagining the worst. I was terrified that something happened to her, or that she had left me. As a last resort, I called my MIL to ask if she was with them. She wasn't, but my MIL got very worried to hear that she had disappeared for 2 days. She said she would try to reach her and let me know if there was any news. We decided to call 911 if she was still unavailable. I spent the next half an hour in utter panic, but then I got a call from my wife. She said that she was perfectly fine and needed some time to fix things, and I didn't have to involve her mother and stress her out for no reason. She sounded completely nonchalant and even annoyed. The fact that she showed no concern for stressing me out made me angry, but I controlled myself and asked her where she was and when she was coming back. She said that she would be back the next morning and hung up. I went to bed frustrated and extremely upset. I even thought of taking some time away from her. Little did I know what was in store for me. She woke me up the next morning and seemed unusually happy. I asked her about where she was yesterday, and she said she was fixing a problem. What she said next was wilder than anything I could have imagined. And trust me when I say I had spent weeks thinking of everything that could go wrong. I asked her what she meant, and she said that this pregnancy was putting stupid doubt in my mind and destroying our marriage. So she decided to save our marriage and got an abortion. She looked directly into my eyes and said that now I had no reason to doubt her loyalty and we could have a fresh start for our marriage. I was flabbergasted. I think this is the first time in my life that I have actually used this word and meant it. I just looked at her and asked her if she was joking, and she said she was completely serious and hoped that I could relax now and not let silly doubts bother me anymore. That was my breaking point. I stared at her for a few more minutes, got up and left. I was afraid that I would have some sort of mental breakdown if I spent a second more in her presence. She started to follow me, but I told her to stay away from me if she didn't want trouble. I suppose my tone was serious enough to stop her. On the way out of the building, I called my lawyer and told her that I was divorcing my wife, and she needed to start the paperwork as soon as possible. I told her that we needed to make sure she didn't get a penny of my money and set up a meeting for the next morning. I didn't know how exactly things would go, but I knew what to do. I called Darren and asked where he was. He said he was somewhere in Atlanta. I told him that I was divorcing my wife and asked him not to waste my time and just admit that they slept together. He stayed silent for a few minutes and just apologized to me. That did it for me. I knew there was nothing else to do. I checked into a hotel for the night and braced myself for everything that I knew was coming my way. The next morning, I woke up and went straight to my lawyer and gave her all the details. The adultery, the abortion, the whole 9 yards, basically. She said that even though it's difficult to get a clean divorce with no alimony unless both parties come to a mutual understanding, since my wife has a high-paying job of her own and she is definitely the one at fault here, we did have a chance. I didn't even care about the money, honestly. It was more about the principle of the matter. I was done with this woman. I couldn't believe how cold she could be. It was like I had spent all these years with a stranger. The person I married and loved would not be capable of doing something so insane. I know that she slept with my stepbrother, but there was a chance that she was pregnant with my baby, and now we have no way of ever finding out. After almost 6 years into this relationship, changing my plans to accommodate her wishes and doing everything I could to be a good husband, this is what I got. I called her assistant and asked if she was at work, and she was. I asked her to not let my wife know I called and lied about planning a surprise for her. I then went home, packed up as many of her things as I could in 3 suitcases and put them out in the hall. The next step was calling a locksmith and changing our locks. I did not want to see her. I did not want her in my home, and I did not want to see her. I then packed some of my own stuff in an overnight bag and headed back to my hotel, because I didn't want to be home when she came back. By the time everything was done, It was almost 5 o'clock and I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. The moment I reached my hotel, I crashed on the bed and fell asleep. I woke up to my phone ringing. It was my wife, of course, but I decided to give her the same silent treatment that she gave me the day she got the abortion behind my back. She kept calling me, and there were a million texts that I didn't bother to read. As far as I was concerned, I had nothing to say to her. After almost an hour of calling me relentlessly, she finally stopped. I thought she gave up, but then I got a text from Darren saying that she had reached out to him asking if I had spoken to him. He told her that it was over and that I knew everything. He apologized again on text, but I couldn't care less about that. I didn't text him back either and was thinking of what to do next. The next step is where I think I might have taken it a step too far, but I was heartbroken and humiliated. I didn't know what else to do. So something you should know about my wife is that she comes from a very conservative Southern family. They do things a certain way over there and had been pressuring her to have kids from the moment we got married. Basically, for years, I had taken her side at every family event about taking our time. I never once revealed that the only reason we weren't trying to have children was because she wanted to wait. I knew that if they found out about her cheating and having an abortion, it would not be very pleasant for her. So I decided to just be petty for once in my life and called my MIL. I calmly explained everything to her and told her that I was divorcing her daughter for violating my trust. She sounded mortified. She wouldn't believe me. I told her that Darren had already admitted to the affair, and as far as the abortion was concerned, I could show her the positive pregnancy test and the doctor's reports from our first visit. The rest she could just ask her daughter to explain. I expected a reaction from my wife real soon, and sure enough, she was blowing up my phone in no time. I tried to wait it out, but when she refused to quit after an hour and a half of relentless calling, I finally picked up. Her reaction was as expected. She was beyond angry and said that I was wrecking her life for no reason, and that she had no place to go for the night. I ignored her attempts to get a reaction out of me and told her she was free to check into any hotel of her choice, and told her not to annoy me. I told her that she would be hearing from my lawyer soon, and any communication from now will be done through our lawyers. I also told her that I would get the rest of her things packed and delivered anywhere she wanted. She told me that her parents were absolutely furious with her and said that she was not welcome in their family anymore and could say goodbye to ever inheriting a cent from them. This was kind of unexpected even by my in-laws. I expected them to be angry, but perhaps not do something this drastic. Obviously, I didn't say any of this to my wife. I told her that she should have thought of this before going behind my back, and that what her parents do is none of my concern. She said that I was immature and petty, and shouldn't have dragged her parents into our marital problems because now her life was ruined, and she didn't have anyone. I responded by saying that I couldn't care less about her, and hung up on her. She proceeded to send me a billion texts calling me all kinds of names and saying that she would take every penny I had and make me regret this. I also got a call from my father-in-law. He said that he was ashamed of his daughter and apologized to me for what she did. He told me that they were done letting her get away with everything and hoped that this would teach her a lesson. He asked me for the reports from our visit, which I was more than happy to share with him. It has been a few hours since then and my wife keeps texting me. I'm thinking of just blocking her, but somewhere in the back of my head, I have this nagging voice that keeps telling me I took things too far and should have kept it between the two of us. I don't regret locking her out of my apartment, and I definitely don't have second thoughts about the divorce, but I know what a huge blow it is for her to be cut off from her parents. AITA for telling my in-laws about my wife's adultery and abortion? Update 1. I want to thank everyone who supported what I did, and those of you who shared your own stories made me feel a lot less alone than I was feeling, and also put me at ease about my reaction. I've been dealing with the divorce stuff and it is not easy. She refuses to cooperate with me and is adamant on getting alimony. We have been trying to reach an agreement among our lawyers and avoid going to court because we all know how messy divorces can get. But it seems like she is treating this like an offense against her ego and does not exactly care about practicality. I am extremely glad I had the foresight to kick her out of the apartment before she had a chance to take the ultrasound documents and the pregnancy test I have with me now. I have spoken to Darren about the whole situation. As angry as I am at him, he says he will cooperate and even testify if he has to. He has also avoided all contact with my wife and has blocked her on every possible platform. He has apologized for what he has done. Not that his apology means anything to me, but at least he isn't doubling down on his mistake like she did. I couldn't resist my own curiosity and asked him for details about the affair, and he said that it did start the weekend I went to Vegas. It continued as long as he lived there, and apparently they met a few times after he moved out as well. He said that he had no idea about her pregnancy or her abortion. As angry as I am at him, I do need him to act right in case things go that far. I also know that the only reason he is suddenly so considerate of my needs is because he has been relying on my dad financially because his savings have run out, and my dad has made it clear that he will be cut off permanently if he makes the situation worse in any way. My dad has made it clear that the only reason he is not cutting him off immediately is because we might need him if the divorce gets complicated. I am trying as hard as I can to not lash out at him, and it has not been easy. No other good news as of yet, except that I have moved back into my apartment. I don't know exactly where she is, and I cannot pretend to care. I am glad that I have owned this apartment for far longer than I have been married to this woman, so it is unlikely that I will lose it. That's all for now. I am gearing up for the divorce to get uglier. It's not like I have any other choice. I'll try to update you guys once things settle down a little. Update 2. I'm officially divorced, folks. It has been around 6 months since my last update, and I have been incredibly caught up in everything. Since my last update, things have moved forward with the divorce. My wife continued to be difficult initially, but after several pretrial hearings, depositions, and settlement conferences later, it became clear that if we let this go to a trial, it would only end badly for her. Darren gave his statement under oath, and we already had evidence of her pregnancy. We brought in our gyno for her statement, and she backed us on everything. The depositions were particularly revealing. Under oath, my wife had to answer some tough questions. Her demeanor and the inconsistencies in her story only worked against her. Darren's deposition confirmed our suspicions, and his apology, while it meant nothing to me, was a crucial piece of evidence. They also stupidly took some pictures in some intimate settings during the affair, which Darren had on his phone. It was impossible to deny the truth. After the depositions, we moved to settlement conferences. These were tense, but my wife's lawyers seemed to realize that fighting for alimony wasn't going to be fruitful given her high-paying job and the solid evidence of her infidelity. It became clear that her demands for alimony wouldn't hold up in court. We were willing to settle things amicably, but I was not going to be taken advantage of. Eventually, my wife conceded. She agreed to forego any claims for alimony. The settlement also ensured that she would not receive any part of my assets beyond what we agreed upon, which was fair given her contributions during our marriage. I'm glad that the final agreement was reached without the need for an unnecessary trial that would only drain my energy and my finances. She will receive her personal belongings, and we've divided our joint assets equitably. The settlement ensures that both of us can move on without further entanglements. I am beyond relieved that everything is over now, but I can't help but feel like all of this has been a huge waste of my time. Not just the divorce, but the whole marriage. I cannot believe I wasted my time and energy and derailed my plans of starting a family for someone who didn't hesitate to throw it all away for essentially nothing. Thank you all for your support and advice. It's been invaluable during this tough time. If anyone else is going through something similar, stay strong and lean on your support network. It gets better. Update 3. Don't know if anyone's still interested, but I posted on this sub at the beginning of the year, and it has been a few months since my last update. A couple of hours ago, I got a call from my dad. I picked up not expecting much, but he told me something that honestly left me wondering how to react. Apparently, Darren and my ex-wife are seeing each other again. I haven't been in contact with either of them and didn't know that Darren found a job in the city and moved here. I guess it was enough to rekindle their flame, and she somehow forgot all the insults she hurled at him during the divorce. I feel disgusted. I feel betrayed and like someone made a fool of me. My dad said that he has made it clear to both Darren and my stepmom that he wants nothing to do with Darren anymore. Feels good to have my old man at my side at least. Anyway, that's that. I hope I don't hear anything about this anymore, so I don't think I'll have any updates for you guys anymore. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. When I told my stepmom she can never replace my mom, she convinced my dad to throw me out. But I got my revenge on her and my dad and had them thrown out instead. I 19F lost my mom to cancer when I was 14. It was devastating. Mom was my best friend, my rock. We did everything together. Baking, gardening, weekend trips. She taught me to be strong, independent, and to always stand up for myself. Losing her left a huge hole in my life. Mom's battle with cancer was long and hard. She was first diagnosed when I was 10, and for a while it seemed like she might beat it. We had good days where she felt strong enough to take me to the park or help me with homework. But there were also bad days filled with hospital visits and the sound of her getting sick in the bathroom. Through it all, she never lost her spirit. Even on her worst days, she'd find a way to make me laugh or tell me how much she loved me. Dad, 45M, was there too, but he was always more distant. He worked long hours at his law firm, saying he needed to make sure we had enough money for Mom's treatments. Looking back, I think he was just scared and didn't know how to handle the situation. He'd come home late, kiss Mom on the forehead, and retreat to his study with a glass of whiskey. When Mom passed, it felt like our family fell apart. Dad buried himself in work even more. I was left to navigate my grief alone. I'd come home from school to an empty house, make myself dinner, and cry myself to sleep. Dad and I barely spoke, beyond necessary conversations about school or household chores. This went on for about 2 years. Then, out of the blue, Dad introduced me to Caroline, 38F. They'd met at a work function and had been dating for a few months. I was shocked. I hadn't even realized Dad was seeing anyone. Caroline seemed nice enough at first, but I was wary. Felt too soon, like Dad was trying to replace Mom. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony. I put on a brave face for Dad's sake, but inside I was a mess of conflicting emotions. Part of me was glad to see Dad happy again, but another part felt like he was betraying Mom's memory. From the start, Caroline tried too hard to be my new mom. She was always hovering, trying to give advice, wanting to do mother-daughter activities. It felt forced and made me uncomfortable. I made it clear I wanted space, but she didn't listen. Things came to a head last month. I was home from college for the weekend. Caroline cornered me in the kitchen, saying we needed to talk about our relationship. She went on about how she'd been trying so hard to connect with me, how she loved me like her own daughter, and how hurt she was that I kept pushing her away. I'd had enough. I told her bluntly that she needed to back off, that she could never replace my mom, would never be as important to me, and needed to stop trying to force a relationship that wasn't there. I said I appreciated her making my dad happy, but that didn't mean I had to see her as my mother. Caroline burst into tears and ran to my dad. He came storming in, furious. He yelled at me for being ungrateful and hurting Caroline's feelings. I tried to explain my side, but he wouldn't listen. He told me I needed to apologize immediately or face consequences. I refused. Dad then dropped the bomb. He was cutting off my college tuition. He said if I couldn't appreciate my family, I didn't deserve their support. I was shocked. My mom had left money specifically for my education, but apparently Dad had control over it. I called my maternal grandparents in tears. They were outraged. Turns out Mom had set up a trust for my college funds that Dad wasn't supposed to touch. They promised to look into it and told me not to worry. My grandparents had always been a big part of my life, especially after Mom died. They lived a few hours away, so I didn't see them as often as I'd like, but we talked on the phone regularly. They were the ones who kept Mom's memory alive, telling me stories about her childhood and reminding me how much she loved me. A week after the blow-up with Caroline, I got an eviction notice from Dad. He was kicking me out of the house, saying I was no longer welcome if I couldn't respect the family. I was devastated. How could he choose his new wife over his own daughter? My grandparents stepped in. They hired a lawyer and discovered Dad had been mismanaging Mom's estate. He'd used money from my college fund for house renovations and to buy Caroline expensive gifts. It was all illegal. As we dug deeper, we uncovered more. Dad had been dipping into the trust fund almost since Mom died. At first, it was small amounts, a few $100s here and there, but after he met Caroline, the withdrawals got bigger. He'd bought her a car, taking her on lavish vacations, all with money that was meant for my future. Long story short, we took Dad to court. The judge ruled in our favor. Dad and Caroline were ordered to move out of the house, which was actually left to me in Mom's will, and repay all the money they'd taken. My grandparents became my legal guardians and took control of my trust. The court proceedings were brutal. Dad tried to paint me as an ungrateful, rebellious teenager who was jealous of his new relationship, but the evidence was clear. When the judge announced her decision, I saw something in Dad's eyes I'd never seen before: defeat. Now, Dad and Caroline are living in a small apartment, struggling financially. They keep trying to contact me, saying they're sorry and want to make amends, but I'm done. I'm back in college, living in the house during breaks, and finally feeling like I can breathe again. Some friends say I went too far, that I should forgive Dad and try to rebuild our relationship. But I don't think I can ever trust him again. He chose his new wife over me and tried to ruin my future. Am I the A for cutting them off completely? Update 1. It's been about 3 months since my last post, and a lot has happened. First, thank you all for your support and advice. It really helped me feel less alone during this difficult time. After the court ruling, Dad and Caroline moved out of the house. It was a surreal experience, watching them pack up their things while I stood there with my grandparents. Dad tried to talk to me one last time, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. The hurt was still too raw. As they were leaving, I noticed Dad lingering in front of the family photos on the wall. There was one of him, Mom, and me at the beach when I was about 8. It was taken a few months before Mom's diagnosis. We all looked so happy, so unaware of what was coming. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the Dad I used to know, the one who would give me piggyback rides and read me bedtime stories. But then Caroline called his name and the moment was gone. Living in the house alone during college breaks was strange at first. It's a big place for just one person, and everywhere I looked there were memories of Mom and, unfortunately, of Dad and Caroline too. I decided to redecorate to make it feel more like my own space. My grandparents helped me pick out new furniture and paint colors. It was therapeutic, like I was reclaiming the home that should have been mine all along. As I was going through old things in the attic, I found a box of Mom's journals. Reading them has been both heartbreaking and healing. She wrote about her hopes and fears, her love for me and Dad, and her thoughts on what our lives might be like after she was gone. In one entry, she specifically mentioned hoping Dad would find happiness again, but also expressed concern that he might try to replace her too quickly. It was like she knew what would happen. About a month after they moved out, I started receiving daily calls and messages from Dad and Caroline. At first, I ignored them, but they became more persistent, leaving long voicemails about how sorry they were, how they wanted to make things right. Caroline even sent a handwritten letter, apologizing for trying to replace my mom and promising to respect my boundaries if I gave her another chance. I'll admit, part of me was tempted to hear them out. Despite everything, Dad was still my father. But every time I considered it, I remembered how easily he had cast me aside for Caroline, how he had tried to steal my future. The trust was broken, perhaps irreparably. My grandparents have been my rocks through all of this. They've taken me in emotionally and legally. We've grown so much closer. Grandma tells me stories about Mom that I've never heard before, and Grandpa's been teaching me how to manage my finances. It's bittersweet. I wish I had this relationship with them while Mom was still alive, but I'm grateful for it now. I've also been reconnecting with Mom's side of the family. Aunts, uncles, cousins. I hadn't seen much since Mom passed and Dad remarried. They've all been incredibly supportive. It's like I'm rediscovering a part of myself that was lost when Mom died. My Aunt Sarah, Mom's younger sister, has been especially helpful. She's only 10 years older than me, and we've developed a close bond. She's been sharing stories about Mom from when they were growing up, filling in gaps in my knowledge of who Mom was before she became a mother. It's helping me feel connected to Mom in a new way. As for college, I'm back full-time and doing well. The trust my mom left is more than enough to cover my expenses. I've even started therapy to work through my grief and the recent trauma with Dad and Caroline. It's helping slowly but surely. Dad and Caroline's financial situation has gotten worse. From what I've heard through family grapevine, Dad lost his job. Apparently, the scandal with misusing my trust fund didn't sit well with his employers. Caroline's been picking up extra shifts at her job to make ends meet. Part of me feels guilty, but then I remind myself that they brought this on themselves. I'm still struggling with whether I made the right choice in cutting them off completely. Some days I'm angry and want nothing to do with them. Other days, I miss the dad I used to have before Mom died and everything changed. But for now, I'm focusing on healing and building a life for myself. Maybe someday I'll be ready to consider letting them back in, but that day isn't today. Update 2. It's been almost a year since my original post, and I wanted to give you all an update. So much has changed, yet in many ways things have settled into a new normal. I graduated college last month. It was a bittersweet moment. I was proud of my accomplishment but sad that Mom wasn't there to see it. My grandparents and extended family came to the ceremony. Dad and Caroline weren't invited, and honestly, I was relieved they didn't try to show up uninvited. The graduation ceremony itself was emotional. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I thought about how Mom had always stressed the importance of education. She talked about how her own mother, my grandmother, had to drop out of high school to help support her family. Mom was the first in her family to go to college, and she was determined that I would have that opportunity too. Knowing that I'd fulfilled that dream for her, despite all the obstacles, felt like a tribute to her memory. Speaking of Dad and Caroline, they finally stopped trying to contact me. The last message I got from them was about 4 months ago. A brief email from Dad saying he respected my decision and would leave me alone, but that he'd always be there if I ever wanted to reconnect. I haven't responded, and I'm not sure if I ever will. I've heard through family that they've moved to another state for a fresh start. Dad found a new job, and Caroline's pregnant. It's strange to think I might have a half-sibling out there someday. Part of me hopes they've learned from their mistakes and will be better parents this time around. Another part of me is angry that they get to start over while I'm still dealing with the fallout of their actions. The news of Caroline's pregnancy brought up a lot of complicated feelings. I found myself thinking about the sibling I might have had if Mom hadn't gotten sick. She and Dad had talked about having another child, but then the cancer diagnosis came and those plans were put on hold indefinitely. Now Dad was getting that second chance at parenthood, but with someone else. It felt unfair, like he was getting to live out the future that should have been Mom's. As for me, I'm doing better. Therapy has helped a lot. I'm starting to work through my grief over Mom and the complicated feelings about Dad. I've realized that it's okay to miss the good times with Dad while still being angry about what he did. It doesn't make me weak or a pushover, it just makes me human. I've decided to keep the house. It's full of memories, both good and bad, but it's mine. I'm slowly making it my own, filling it with new memories. I've even started gardening, something I used to do with Mom. It makes me feel close to her. Last weekend, I planted a rose bush in the backyard, Mom's favorite flower. As I was digging the hole, I found an old toy car buried in the dirt. I recognized it immediately. It was one Dad had given me for my 7th birthday. We'd spent hours playing with it in the yard that summer. Finding it brought back a flood of happy memories from before everything went wrong. For a moment, I considered calling Dad to tell him about it, but then I remembered everything that had happened, and the moment passed. My relationship with my grandparents and Mom's side of the family continues to grow stronger. We have weekly dinners, and I'm getting to know my cousins better. It's like I found the family I always needed. I'm starting a new job next month in a city about an hour away, close enough to visit family often but far enough to feel like I'm starting my own life. I'm nervous but excited. The job is at a nonprofit that provides support to families dealing with cancer. It feels like a way to honor Mom's memory and turn my painful experience into something positive. I'll be working with kids who have a parent with cancer, helping them navigate the emotions and challenges I know all too well. It's not going to be easy, but I think it's important work. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had just apologized to Caroline that day, if I had tried harder to accept her. But then I remind myself that I didn't do anything wrong by having boundaries and honoring my Mom's memory. Dad and Caroline made their choices, and now we're all living with the consequences. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe someday I'll be ready to have dad in my life again. Maybe not. For now, I'm focusing on building a life that would make mom proud. And for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about the future. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Parents passed away when I was 17 and left me a huge inheritance. But my greedy stepdad tried to take all of it from me, so I moved out and sued him. Now the court is making him do this. Hi everyone, I recently turned 18, which I desperately wanted to for the last few months. You see, my dad died when I was a little boy, 7 I think. I have a very faint memory of his. Then a few years later, my mom got married to my stepdad. I don't know why, but I never felt comfortable around him. He gave a very shady vibe. I always knew he was not the kind of man he had been portraying himself to be in front of my mom. I'm an introvert. More than talking, I like to observe people. That's how I concluded he was not the person he was playing. Initially, I tried to caution mom about him, but she snapped my feeling and asked me to put an effort to build a relationship with my new family. She thought I was just jealous. But my concerns were also valid. He had a daughter, Martha, who was of my age. We didn't get along well for obvious reasons. She was a dumb brat. She threw tantrums at us from the moment we came to her house. There was one more thing that I hated about my mom's second wedding. It was we who had to make all the compromises. Mom and I had to move to his place because his princess didn't want to leave her house. I was transferred to her school because it would be easier for them to pick up/drop both the kids at once. You know what happens to a new kid in a school. On top of that, Martha would gang up with other bullies and pick on me. I told her to mom, but that didn't help. Mom dismissed it and said she would not interfere in the siblings' matter. Plus, I was bullied even more on the next day, but thankfully it soon ended. I was good in maths, which kind of saved my ass as I helped other kids during recess. Soon I made friends and it got better for me. However, having her in the house was still horrible. I used to get mad at mom for overshowering her love for Martha. I hated it because Martha didn't reciprocate my mom's love, and on top of that, she would be mean to my mom. She would yell at her every now and then to not cross her boundaries. Eventually, I got distant from mom as she was more busy making relationships with her new husband and stepdaughter. During that phase, I got closer to my grandparents. They were quite well off. They had this big house with a pool and a huge garden. I used to spend most of my day off from school at my grandparents'. When Martha got to know about the pool, she tagged along with me. I hated it. I told my mom not to send Martha with me because we couldn't stand each other. She asked me to take this as a way of bonding with her. I said I didn't want to bond with her because she is a horrible person, but my mom would ask me to be a bigger person and initiate the goodness. I was just 4 months older than Martha, and yet my mom would ask me to compromise because apparently I was her big brother. I was too small to rebel, so most of the time I would have to suck it up. Martha was not attached to my grandparents. The only reason she wanted to go there was because of the pool. She was an evil kid and would always get away with her nuisance. Her dad pampered her to the core, and my mom chose to look otherwise. But my grandparents were able to see through her cute dumbness. They would put her in place if she ever crossed her line. To my grandparents, I was the only one who was truly their family. It was natural for them to be protective of me. You see, my dad was the only child of my grandparents, so they didn't have to invest a lot in raising children. They had invested in some good properties over the years, which compounded in their old age. They had an asset manager to handle everything because they were not capable of handling it on their own. My stepdad worked as an account manager in a private bank, so he had experience in handling money matters. My mom recommended him to my grandparents. Initially they refused, but eventually my stepdad was able to win their trust, and my grandparents hired him to manage their assets. I was not happy with their decision to let stepdad manage their asset, but I was a young boy. Who would listen to me and money matters? He tried hard to impress my grandparents and put up a gentleman's mask. I was able to see through his acts. I just waited to turn 18 so that I could live my life on my own. However, when I was 17, my mom went with my grandparents for a month-long trip. It was supposed to be a family trip, but unfortunately, our high school test got postponed and we had to stay. Stepdad opted to stay and take care of us. I hated to have him in the house. He shows his true colors when mom is not around. My test was over in a week. To avoid seeing him around, I took up a part-time job at a grocery store. I came home only at the night. He tried to school me, asking where I'd been spending my days. He said is my legal guardian, so he's entitled to watch over me. Legal guardian my ass. I said mom is my legal guardian and she knows where I'm spending my days, so I don't need to tell you. He didn't like my assertiveness. However, my arrogance was short-lived because a week later, I got the news that my mom and my grandparents died in a car accident. I felt so horrible that I was unable to accept the truth. It took 2 days for their dead bodies to be shipped to our place. Every second of those days I prayed they were different people and not them. They say denial is the first stage of grief. I was in denial that something this horrendous would happen to me. I was hoping that some miracle would happen and they would pop up and say that they were alive. I was in a different zone on those 2 days. I refused to accept that they were no more. My mother's side of the family came to support me, but I refused to accept anyone's condolences until I saw my family's lifeless bodies myself. I rushed to my room and locked up myself for days. I was angry at them for leaving me alone with this wicked man. I was angry at God, angry at my dad, angry at my mom, angry at my grandparents, as how could they? I just couldn't take that grief. My uncle helped me a lot in navigating through it. I was so grief-stricken that I couldn't speak a word at their funeral. Stepdad gave them an honorable farewell. The fact that all of them whom I thought to be family left together, and the worst part was they left to a man whom I hated the most. After the funeral, a lawyer approached me. I'd never met a lawyer before. My mom had no big assets. She did a normal job. She had a house that she had sold off before moving to stepdad's place. There were insurance money and all, but I was not too hopeful about it because of her profound love for stepdad and Martha. I was right. As per mom's will, 75% of the assets, which were her insurance and money left in the bank account, would go to my stepdad and I get 25% of it. However, the real show began when the lawyer read out my grandfather's will. As per that, 20% would go to charity, and the remaining 80% would be divided between me and mom. In case one of us died, their portion would go to the other one, and under unforeseen circumstances, if both of us died, the entire inheritance would go to charity. In this case, my mother's portion would be inherited by me, which made me the owner of 80% of the wealth. However, there was a clause that dictated I'd be able to have possession of the asset only after I turned 18. Until then, the asset would be controlled by my legal guardian, which was my mom. Now that my mother was not there, my legal guardian would ultimately be my stepdad whether I like it or not. The responsibility of taking care of my grandparents' wealth took over my grief to an extent. On top of that, I had to deal with the greediness of my stepdad, so sorrow kind of took a back seat. Not to mention that my stepdad was not happy to see me becoming a millionaire overnight. His behavior towards me completely changed. He acted as the most caring person in the world, the same act which he used to put in front of my mother and grandparents in the initial days. I used to be put up in my room. He would bring me food and soup and would knock on my door often to check on me. I was suspicious of his motive, but instead of confronting him directly, I waited for him to make the move. I knew he couldn't put up this act for a long time. Just a week after the funeral, he brings up the inheritance talks. He goes, as you know, I used to handle your grandparents' assets. Sadly, they are no more. In order to continue my work, I would need you to sign those papers for approval. It was too overwhelming for me. I was scared that he would exploit my vulnerability. I had watched and read too much fiction where the main character loses everything by signing some unverified documents. So I asked him if this document would be to rehire him as the asset manager. He was taken aback by my question. Maybe he didn't see that coming. He said, partly yes. I was like, what's the whole thing? He said, I was too young to understand this. I insisted he made me understand, or else I wouldn't sign anything. He said these things were too complicated for a 17-year-old, but he would try the layman's explanation for my understanding. He said, in the absence of my mom, he is my uncontested legal guardian, fair enough. So I should hand over the inheritance to him. Since he is experienced in money matters, he would not only keep it secure but also grow it for me. I clarified, you want me to give you access to manage my money, right? He replied, well, slightly different. To ease up the complexities, I would want you to transfer them into my name. I lost my mind. He had been hiding his greed under the wordy jargon, but when I broke it down for him, he had no other way than to admit his true intentions. I made it more evident to him that I understood everything. I asked, so you want to own my grandparents' wealth, don't you? He understood he was caught off guard. It's for your own good. I'll help it grow. I was like, you could do it by being my manager, why do you have to be an owner? He said, you're teenage, you are raging with hormones. Money is known to bring the worst out of a person. What if you get into the wrong company and empty your family's wealth? So it's better I safeguard it for you. I rolled my eyes, and he said, you know how women hunt for men for money? What if a girl traps you into marriage and then divorces you and takes away all your wealth for alimony? You are too naive for the cruel world out there. I took out my phone and searched for the law around PrUP. He didn't realize I was able to see through his BS. He goes, if you think you'll be able to dodge all these bullets, think about your relatives and friends who would try to manipulate you and exploit you for the money. I snapped at him, glad that brought this up. If anyone who is manipulating me now, it's you. I'm not a fool to fall for your pretentious mask. You think me to be a dumbass just like your bimbo daughter, but mind you, I am not. I may be 17 and may not have experience in money matters, but I have the intelligence to differentiate between reality and a facade, so back off. You're not getting anything from here. He went away that day but tried to convince me again, but I put my foot down and said a big no. I'm not going to transfer any bit of the inheritance to him. Eventually, he turned bitter towards me. He started counting the favors he had done for me. He said he gave me food and shelter, married my mom, gave me his name, and loved me like his son. I said, cut the crap. Still no from me. Slowly, the manipulations took the form of arguments, and soon it got violent where both of us yelled at each other. One morning, it got so severe that he pushed me out of the house and locked me out. I saw terror in his eyes that day. I felt I was an inch closer to being physically harmed. I told my friend about this, and he cautioned me. Though my stepdad is not gaining anything from my death, everything would go to charity. But what if he pulls off a foul play for the inheritance? Money is capable of bringing out the worst in people. The next day, when he was not at home, I came, backpacked my stuff and left. I have given my gadgets to my friend in exchange for letting me live with him for 4 months. Meanwhile, I told my stepdad that I was living with my maternal uncle in case he reported me missing. He texted me to be careful and not get manipulated and give away my wealth. However, on my 18th birthday, my maternal uncle did reach out to me asking about my well-being, but he didn't say anything about money. Then I visited my grandfather's lawyer who initiated the transfer of assets in my name. He asked me to make a will to safeguard my interest. I have done that. The thing is, now that I legally own everything and my stepdad hopefully cannot pull tricks, would it be wise to hire him as the asset manager? I have a very limited understanding of all this. Besides, I'm prepping for my undergrad admission. I need someone to take care of my wealth, so instead of hiring someone unknown, do I bet on my stepdad? Update. Sorry for not updating this sooner. Been too busy juggling a lot of responsibilities. As I mentioned, I was living with my friend until I turned 18, and the asset was transferred to my name. My lawyer recommended an asset manager for me. I moved to my grandparents' house for a while, but the house was too big for me, so I rented it out and I moved to a secure apartment. My stepdad was furious when I told him that I was firing him. He had been managing it until then. He tried manipulating me that the lawyer had a secret motive behind this recommendation. I still followed my instincts and hired a professional. Then I got to know why my stepdad was pushing so hard not to hire someone else. My account manager reported discrepancies in accounting. He hinted at the possibility of money laundering. When stepdad realized he would be uncovered, he filed a case to overturn the will to divert the attention. His case had no merit. He knew he would not win it, but it was done only to divert my attention from the money laundering case. However, I didn't lose my composure and sued him for fraud. A neutral and thorough investigation was ordered. Stepdad's laptop and tabs were seized. His bank account was frozen, and he was ordered not to leave the city until the investigation was over. It came out that stepdad had been embezzling funds from my grandparents' property. He lost both the lawsuits. His plea for overturning the will was thrown away on the first day of the hearing. For the money laundering suit filed by me, he tried his best to defend himself, but he could not. His shady activities were not new. He had been doing this ever since my grandparents hired him. After their death, he thought he got a free hand and whisked $150K in total through all assets. However, when he realized that I was not easy to manipulate, he tried to cover up and put back some money to fill the holes, but it was a huge gap to cover up. The court ordered him to pay all the money he had siphoned. He was heavily fed to trade off his prison time. Not only this, he was asked to pay me the court case charges. Whatever he received from Mom's will was gone, and paying the fine and compensation, in the end, he was barely left with anything but a knee debt. He ultimately had to sell his house to pay for the $150K money he had embezzled from my grandfather's property. I made everything sound so easy, but trust me, it was not. When I pressed him with a money laundering case, I had to face a lot of brunt from him. He tried all the tricks to back me from manipulating me into thinking I wasn't capable enough to handle everything alone and that I needed a guardian over me, to guilt-tripping me that my mom would have been so hurt to know I sued her husband. He did it all. He was damn so good at it. At one point, I actually started questioning myself whether I really would be able to handle everything alone or do I needed an arsenal with me. If none of these tricks worked, he tried to threaten me. For many days, I felt someone was following me. I got threatening notes pasted on my car window. I couldn't do anything because there was no evidence that it was him. When I confronted him, he gave an evil laugh and said, "Maybe I should be alert. It's not new that people get killed for money." That was when I left my grandparents' house and shifted to an apartment. I felt unsafe in a big house. Apartments seemed a lot safer. Not only him, but his loser daughter also came behind me. She was not as smart as her dad, who did not leave a footprint of his threats. This dumb girl came directly to my door. She screamed at me for bringing them to the streets. I said, "Now you would understand how one feels to leave their house. Remember how you used to mock me as a kid when I cried because Mom sold our house? Karma is a you-know." She called me names and I gave it back to her. She got so furious that she tried to punch me in the face. I dodged it and unleashed my dog on her. She left with bruises and wounds from the encounter with my dog. Dogs are damn faithful. However, after the court gave the judgment in my favor, my lawyer asked me to get a restraining order against them with reference to the incidents happening to me, threat messages, etc. I managed to get a temporary restraining order for 6 months because they don't have a criminal history and there was no evidence except for Martha barging at my door. It's almost 4 months since all this ended. I have enrolled in an undergrad school. By the way, I'm pursuing law. I feel like I would need to know the law of the land to handle the wealth, so what better than saving the attorney's charges? I am also planning to take a crash course on investing in finance so that I understand what my account manager is up to. Now, I don't have any other option than to trust him blindly. In a nutshell, life got better. Thank you guys for all the empathy and love. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Friend wants to crash my romantic Japan trip with my fiancé. Expects us to pay for her accommodation and everything else, and won't take no for an answer. I, 22F, and my fiancé, 23M, are going on our first trip together. I'm really excited, as this is my first time on a plane and even leaving the state I've lived in my whole life. We've been planning for this trip since earlier this year, and we've gotten our tickets as well as accommodations. Altogether, we've already spent about $4,500 on everything, which has been something we've been saving for as we're both college students. Our trip is in about a month, and in comes my friend. We'll call her Ashley, 22F, who's been my friend for about a year. She'd brought up going to Japan as well, kind of jokingly, when we told her about the trip. I didn't think she was serious, but then she brought it up a few more times, even saying that she had a family member she could stay with. She asked if she could spend some time during the days joining us on our adventures, while this family member was at work. I was supportive of this idea as I know this would be her first time to Japan as well, and I care about her. However, all of a sudden, she told me she wants to get the tickets, but her family member no longer will have space for her to stay. She wants to know if she can stay in our accommodations and join us on our flight back home. I let her know that our accommodation has strict rules against having more than 2 people, and there's only one small bed in this studio. She said she'd be fine sleeping anywhere, on the floor or couch, etc. I told her that I'd feel more comfortable if we didn't chance a fee or getting in trouble in general, as I really just want a comfortable stay. I tell her that we're still willing to spend time with her during the day, and I began sending her accommodations in her budget. I was hoping this would be enough, but instead, she's just asking if we can cancel our accommodations and pay for larger accommodation that can have a bed for her as well. Mind you, she's not saying she will help us pay for the more expensive accommodation or anything else for that matter. She simply just wants to stay with us and for us to pay for a different accommodation. It seems like no matter what I say, she just keeps trying to manipulate me into letting her stay with us. This is also hard because I know my fiancé and I really wanted this to be a romantic trip for us both, as we likely won't be able to afford another for a few years as we finish school. I'm just stuck on what to say or do, and if I'm the here, should I be okay with my friends staying in our accommodation and joining it on our trip? Now for some comments. Comment 1, screw that. She would be around you the entire trip. Every time you and he are making plans, she would want to make changes and expect accommodations for her and what she wants to do. Sure way to ruin your trip is to have a third will invite herself along. Tell her it's a big country. She's welcome to take her own trip, but you're doing your own thing. Comment 2, NTA. This is a chance for you and your fiancé to take a once-in-a-lifetime trip together. Traveling to Japan is expensive. If you share accommodation, you would be giving up a lot of privacy you and your fiancé would have. Personally, I wouldn't have included Ashley in any of my plans, though that's just me. Your trip would go from a romantic getaway for you and your fiancé to a group trip with you, Ashley, and your fiancé. Be straight up with her. Tell her after careful thought you've decided you and your fiancé don't want to share accommodation as you want your privacy, that you will still hang out with her for a couple of days though she will have to get her own accommodation. Comment 3, NTA. How could someone be that dense? She said she would be fine on the floor while you and your fiancé sleep in the bed? Holy. Does she not see how much of an intrusion that is? Send her a picture of a tricycle with a slash through it. But seriously, I would say something like, listen, I really value our friendship, but I've been planning this trip for a long time. I've spent a lot of my hard-earned money on it so that my fiancé and I can have a nice vacation just the 2 of us. If you don't tell her she can't come, you will regret it a lot. Comment 4. Can't people just tell the truth? Tell your friend it's a romantic trip for 2, and that we cannot accommodate you because we want to be alone for a romantic trip. If you are in Japan while we're there, we can make some time to hook up during the day, but at night we have plans and they do not include a third. Just be honest. It's a romantic trip for 2. Tell her it's your first trip together as a couple and you want it to be lovey-dovey and romantic. All the beating around the bush and wondering what to say gets old. Be the adult you are and actually use your words and tell her the truth. You don't be mean about it, but you don't want a third wheel, and explain that to her in a nice and loving way. It's really simple. You're making this much harder than it needs to be. Update. As I'm reading the comments, there's a lot saying that I should be upfront about it being a romantic trip. When I first told her about the trip, I did tell her this is basically going to be our honeymoon. I may have said it jokingly to her, but I did mean it. My fiancé and I have been talking about going to Japan since we got together 8 years ago. I thought this honeymoon comment, as well as me bringing up activities like making our anniversary cake at a shop in Kyoto, clearly set the tone in which I planned this trip to be. I do agree that I should reclarify that this is a romantic trip, but I feel uneasy that she'd receive this well as she shut down all my logical reasons. I was hesitant when she brought up spending some time with us, but I thought maybe it was just something nice to do. I get that's a romantic trip, but my fiancé was fine with it and supported her coming along on some of the more normal things like going to Universal, since it was only going to be a few days of our trip that she'd want to be with us. She originally said she'd only be in Japan a week, and she'd only need to be with us while her family members at work from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. But now things have changed, and she's saying it could be longer. I do have trouble with boundaries, and I always want to be the one helping people out when I can. But as she has been pushing for the last few hours no matter what I say, I've been getting more upset. I just didn't know if I was being selfish towards a friend in need. Now I can definitely see that this was probably the plan all along, and she isn't in a tight spot. She just wants to use us. This realization does hurt, as I thought we had gotten really close in our shared healthcare major, but I guess she really doesn't care about my feelings like I care about her, as cause ultimately I just didn't want to hurt her. She recently got dropped out of our major, so I thought she was just really sad and needed to pick me up. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I spent 5 years believing my best friend took advantage of me, so the title kinda says it all. This is a bit to unpack, so sorry if the post is kind of long. The details all seem relevant, though, and I'm kind of rambling since a bomb was dropped on me today that I just don't know how to handle, and I need some advice. 5 years ago, when I was 23, I had been working with a company that handled hospitality training and stuff like that. What we did really wasn't important, but at that point, I had been with the company for about 3 years already. Mark had gotten hired around the same time as I had, and we did a lot of training and stuff together, got put in the same call center group, and all around just became extremely close friends that hung out after work since we lived close to each other and were both unattached. To point out how close we had gotten, since we were both single folks in the company, and our department always made jokes that we needed to just say screw the company policies and start dating, we always laughed it off because at the end of the day we both had made it abundantly clear to each other that we only saw each other as friends. For what it's worth, I don't remember how the conversation came up, but it had, and it was just a strictly platonic relationship. So, yeah, we were basically attached at the hip for about 2.5 years when I met Paul, at the time 29 SLM and currently 34M, and began dating him. Paul and Mark got along somewhat fine at first, but a few months into dating, Paul started to get upset if I said I was going to grab dinner with Mark after work, even if Paul was working at the time since he had his own long hours. For what it was worth, Mark seemed to understand where Paul was coming from and only grabbed dinner with me when I asked him, never prompting it himself. Well, on my 24th birthday, I decided to throw a party at my apartment, and when Paul flaked on helping me get supplies, Mark stepped in and helped, even going out and buying the lion's share of the booze for the party. The party got going, and Paul ended up showing up an hour after most of the others were there. After a few hours, most of the people started heading out, leaving a few people sleeping in the living room because they were too drunk to drive, and then Mark, Paul, and myself. Mark insisted I'd go lay down since it was my birthday, and he knew I was already pretty drunk myself, so it wasn't right for me to clean up after my own party. So, I said goodnight to everyone, and Paul helped me back to the room. Like I said, I was pretty drunk, and while I remember the night, I also remember being very off my normal composure. He put me in bed on my side, facing the wall, and then left, and I pretty quickly dozed off. Trigger warning now, skip this next paragraph if you don't want the gory details, but it's the only way I've been able to even sort of come to terms with all of it after my time in therapy. The next thing I remember is loud music blaring in the room and feeling completely bound. I was still inebriated, but as I tried to move around, I could feel I was tied to the bed and could feel someone on top of me. I was laying on my stomach, and there was a hand on the back of my head pushing it into the pillow, so I couldn't see anything, and I could feel someone stumbling to try and pull my pajamas down and shoving his hand up against me. Someone was pounding at the door until I heard a loud crack, and then Mark and Paul's voices arguing. The pressure pulled off my head, and I could see the one of them pulling the other away, but in the darkness I couldn't tell who was doing what, but there was a lot of screaming and crashing. A few minutes later, Paul comes back in the room and unties me from the bed and just holds me, telling me Mark had been trying to rape me. I wanted to file a police report, but Paul convinced me not to since he had gotten there in time and nothing had happened, which I should have taken as a red flag, but I just didn't at the time because I was so relieved that I had been saved. I took a few days off from work, blocked Mark on all social media, but not before he texted me trying to tell me that Paul had been the one to attack me and that he was the one that saved me. I didn't believe him because it had been Paul that came in and untied me, though, and if Paul had been trying, then why would he do that? Plus, we were dating, and it just didn't make any sense to me, so I thought Mark had just snapped or something. I ended up quitting from the company before my time off ended because I had been starting to look at advancement in my career and moving on, so I just decided that was my sign and tried to run away from it all. Paul and I kept dating for about 6 months after that until I caught him cheating on me with a lady from his office. Maybe this should have been a bigger red flag to me too, but I had been trying to distance myself from what had happened. Then life just went on. I got comfortable in my new job, stayed away from getting too friendly with anyone from work, and have never had a close guy friend again. Occasionally, I'd see Mark at the grocery store or around town. Like I said, we had lived close to each other, and neither of us moved, and I never felt the need to since he kept his distance from me completely, and I thought I was mostly over what had happened half a decade ago until I get a notification a few hours ago that Paul had messaged me. I thought that was odd because I had blocked him. He made a new account, but I opened the message up anyway because of curiosity. I don't want to share the whole message because there's a lot of personal debt details in it, so I'm going to just hit the important details. So, according to him, Paul is an alcoholic and has been for years, even back when we first started dating. He pretty much was always drinking something or looking for an excuse. He got fired from his job for showing up to work drunk and assaulting the receptionist by trying to force his tongue down her throat in the front lobby at 9 a.m. He was in court-mandated AA, and as part of his recovery, he was trying to make amends with anyone he had wronged because of his habit, and finally, Mark never tried to rape me, it was him. He had been jealous of my friendship with Mark and saw an opportunity to get him out of the picture because of how gullible I was. His words. I'm not gonna lie, I threw up after reading the whole thing. He had so much detail behind all of it that I just felt sick to my stomach that he not only remembered everything from how he had secretly put ties on my bed before I even went to sleep once he saw how drunk I was getting, to how he beat the hell out of Mark and threatened to kill him if he went to the cops. I know it's not a healthy reaction, but I've been drinking a bit since all of that message hit my inbox, trying to decide what to do. I know I need to call my therapist to talk about all of this, but my mind keeps going back to Mark and how betrayed he must have felt over it all. I even unblocked him on all my social media. He never blocked me, so his profiles popped back up pretty quickly, and I've been trying to decide if I should message him or not. I know logically that Paul should be the one messaging him as a part of his AA stuff, but I'm also pretty sure that Mark did block him since Paul mentioned not being able to find him on social media, but he also might not have remembered Mark's last name either, so it might be hard to find him. So, I guess my question is, should I message Mark? What would I even say? Sorry, I didn't believe you when you said you didn't try to rape me? Update 1. A close friend of mine answered her phone and is swinging by to spend the night with me here, just so I have a shoulder to cry on because I could just use a good cry right now. I'm going to leave Mark alone for now while I get my thoughts in order, but I'll probably send him a message in a few days once I can talk to my therapist. I did put the wine away. It's not helpful right now, and I don't want to make the wrong decision and message Mark strict on a somewhat drunk impulse. Next day update. I went to bed last night after putting the wine away when my friend got here, and woke up to so many comments and PMs that I can't quite get back to everyone without being repetitive. So, I want to just answer a few common things I've been messaged or seen in a comment. I mentioned I have told a handful of friends. To be specific, I told 3 plus my therapist. I didn't have a whole lot of close friends back then and wasn't a part of a big friend group either. That said, one of those 3 were here with me last night after I got a hold of her, and she's every bit as disgusted as pretty much everyone else. I can't say for sure if any of them told anyone, and honestly, given the passing of time, I wouldn't expect them to have the same crystal clear image of who they might have told, but I do understand this might have spread without me knowing. I am looking into statute of limitations and reporting in my state. Here from everything I have read over coffee this morning, I believe it hasn't passed, and as several have mentioned, he literally gave me a written confession. As for how I didn't realize Paul was an alcoholic, well, I don't have a good answer for that. I'm going mostly based on his message that told me he was always drinking even back then. We weren't living together, and as I mentioned, there were plenty of days that I didn't see him versus when I did, and I don't even know now if he was even working late all the times he told me he was. I have texted my therapist, and I'm waiting for a reply now. I'm hopeful she is sometime this afternoon or tomorrow that I can speak with her, but my friend is staying with me until I can speak with her just so that I don't have to be alone right now, and I can't say just how much I appreciate it. To those of you that have provided advice or shared your stories with me, thank you deeply from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Last night when I received that message, I was thrown for such a loop that I didn't know where to begin or how to unpack it all. Given the time that had passed, old wounds can be reopened so easily, and this one was a scar that didn't need much to make it pop. Update 3. First off, I want to thank everyone who messaged me to check up on me or to share their own stories with me. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. I would like to start this off by first saying I haven't gone back to the wine, though I did super desperately want to yesterday. I haven't really been much if a drinker since that night 5 years ago and last week when I learned the disgusting truth about Paul. To those of you hoping I would file a police report, I did. I spoke with my therapist at length the Monday following my post, and she was shocked but extremely helpful in helping me process everything, and she spent some time last what should have been the end of our video appointment looking up the statute of limitation laws in my state. There are none for sex crimes, and while she warned me that my report might just be added to a pile of other charges Paul could possibly have against him given that he was assigned court-mandated AA, all the same, I filed the report with screenshots of his messages to me printed and attached. I'm not sure what to expect from that, and at the end of the day, I hope he has an absolute shitty life if it goes nowhere. Now as for Mark, my therapist was insistent that I at the very least write him something, whether it be a letter to mail him or a message on Facebook. He never reached out to me after I unblocked him, but given what he thought I thought of him, I think it's understandable. She, like many of you, pointed out that while he knew he was innocent, the thought of someone believing him capable of something monstrous like that could have weighed on him for all this time, and even if his reception of my message wasn't ideal, he deserved at least the closure that this new turn of events could provide. I took a few days writing and rewriting a message in Notepad. I didn't want to accidentally hit send before I had the wording right, and each time I sat down to write it, I felt like I came up short, even though the message just got longer and longer. Again, I didn't think just saying, "Oh, guess what? I learned Paul is an absolute psychopath last week," surprised, would have been super appropriate either, but I wanted to find the right balance. Here's the message I ended up sending him. "Hi Mark, so this is a bit out of the blue, and I really don't know how to start this, so I'm just going to put it out there. I'm sorry for not listening to you. Paul messaged me last week and revealed everything, and I'm just sorry. This isn't easy to write, and you deserve so much more than just an apology so long after the fact. There's no excuse for me not giving you the benefit of the doubt other than I let myself be stupidly gaslight by a psychopathic man. I see this is the message he sent me. It even confesses to an assault on you in the event that you'd like to press charges against him, as I have already filed a police report for what he did to me. If you would like to talk about any of this at all, my inbox is open. If you want to tell me to F off, well, I guess I understand that too. I'm not sure what I expect really, because this has ripped open a wound I had been trying to heal, and I'm sure this might cause you some distress, but I felt you at the very least deserve to know. I know I probably could have said more, but any time I kept trying to write, I felt like it was just me making excuses. I sent that to him this past Friday, and I'm pretty sure he read it sometime between Friday and Saturday as the read notification had been there when I checked Facebook again at lunch on Saturday. I had been out with my friend Jenny, who had stayed over with me after I learned the truth, and when I told her I had messaged Mark, she wondered if he had responded, so I checked last night at about 6 p.m. My phone dinged, and while I thought it might have been a text from Jenny or maybe my mom, I don't really text or talk to a lot of people, I actually found that Mark had sent me a reply. "I wish you would have listened to me back then, but I'm glad you know the truth." I thought that was all he was going to send me when the 3 dots kept going across the bottom of my screen. He was still typing when he sent me pictures as well. They were graphic. In Paul's assertion that he had beat the hell out of Mark did in fact also come with documented proof from him in the form of pictures. Mark went on to explain that he filed an assault report the next day after my birthday, but that the police had warned him against accusing Paul of sexually assaulting me given the turn of events, and my "don't speak to me again" text I sent him when he tried to explain himself. Nothing had ever come of his police report, and he wasn't even sure why. Neither am I, but he intended to follow up once more today. Mark is still very much the kind person I remember him being, and while I was bracing for him to hold a grudge against me, he instead just expressed his happiness that I finally knew the truth. We exchanged small talk through chat for a little while, but it was nowhere near the conversations we used to have. Mark is actually engaged to a girl he has been dating for about 2 years now. He had apparently never brought any of this up to her until she saw my name flash in his screen with the notification and asked who I was. While some of you expressed concern that my friends had smeared his name, he apparently never heard anything of it. He actually still works for the same company we had both been at, just now in a copywriting role for the marketing team, so at the very least, the lack of a police report for me or making a scene at work worked out in his favor there. I asked if we could keep in touch, even if only with small talk, and he said that he thought that would be okay, though he was a lot busier than he was back then between work and planning his wedding. While I thought that was going to be the end of it, he messaged me a few hours ago to let me know he refiled his police report with the added messages I had sent him, and that if I'd be open to it, He'd like to meet for coffee with his fiancée in tow and a friend of mine if I felt more comfortable doing it that way. Not really sure if that's an entirely good idea, but I shot Jenny a text to see what she thinks and if she'd be open to coming with. She said it's ultimately up to me what I decide to do, and she'd be with me either way. So, yeah, that's the update for those of you who have reached out and asked. Update 4. Hi everyone. Someone brought it to my attention that my posts had been compiled over here, so I wanted to pop in and thank everyone that has reached out to me. Mark and I are planning to meet for coffee here this weekend with some added supervision. I think his fiancée is curious of my intentions, which is fair. I have both apologized to him at this point, but also, as many of you pointed out, he deserved a giant thank you too. I know some of you are telling me to leave him alone, but he was the one to suggest the meeting, and in all fairness, I owe him at least a coffee and much more. Truthfully, words cannot stress how forgiving he has been over what has transpired, and though I'm trying not to blame myself for believing the psychopath, it's not as easy as just letting it go. I knew making my post, some would blame me, that's just Reddit, but being able to put this out there has allowed me a sense of relief in some ways that just talking with my therapist didn't fully accomplish. Police reports have been filed against Paul, and I do hope something comes from it. I know he's in AA, and some have messaged me saying I'm a monster for airing this out when he's trying to better himself. Seriously, I got at least 5 DMS to that tune, but to hell with that, the things he did to me does not get absolved just because he fessed up 5 years after the fact. Final update. I haven't opened this throwaway account in close to a year and a half, and honestly, never expected to come back to it after I aired out learning about the gaslighting monster that had attacked my over half a decade ago. For anyone who wants more details, my profile has the posts logged that I'm really not trying to res hair and rehash it, as I have gotten more than enough of that out of my therapy appointments. The reason I'm posting is primarily out of joy. My attacker, Paul, had a slew of other court dates already when I had filed my case against him, and I had started to lose hope that anything was going to happen since I was reporting an incident from over 5 years ago. But the court system in my state was stupidly overbooked, and I just had to wait for things to take their natural course. Over the last few months, I started to get follow-up calls from an investigator that was apparently going over the details of Paul's case. He was already facing some time in prison over a different assault charge. His time in AA had proven not to be effective even with trying to make amends, and the prosecutor was looking to add my report of sexual assault to an overall criminal case against him, but it would require me to submit either a document to be provided as testimony or to act as an in-person witness. Though I had received Paul's message, I hadn't interacted or seen him in person for well over 4 years, and my therapist suggested I might get some closure over testifying against him in court. This finally happened last week. It was hard, and I won't lie, I cried while I was on the stand, but it felt good. The years hadn't been kind to Paul, and while he certainly looked remorseful sitting in the courtroom, I could give two shit about how this was going to affect him. I left after that and found out just this morning that between his various cases, he's going to prison. I'm not sure how long, but I also know he is being added to the sex offender database, which is another win as far as I'm concerned. Other than that, life has been going pretty well. I've decided to throw myself into some new hobbies, another suggestion by my therapist, and have overall tried to just become the best version of myself as possible. My old friend, Mark, who had taken the blame for Paul's actions for so long, got married in the middle of last year, and while he and his fiancée had offered me an invitation, I didn't feel like it was my place to attend. We hadn't been in contact for so long, and I didn't want to have anyone asking me questions on why I was there when I didn't really have any other friends attending the event. We message every so often, but he's got his own life, and it's not my place to intrude on that. I'm just happy that Paul's never got to derail his life in any huge way outside of the obvious. I'll probably never have reason to log back onto this account again, and really only did it today because I was just so overjoyed in hearing the results that it reminded me I had vented to you all so long ago. Now, to everyone who has reached out to check in on me, thank you. I appreciate each and every one of you. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Got my girlfriend pregnant despite using protection, so I offered to pay for an abortion, but she wants to keep it. Now she's begging me to stay and be a father, but I'm signing away my rights. I 25M had been with my now ex-23F for a little over 3 months. I always made sure we used lots of precaution when having sex. She was on birth control and I always used condoms. I wanted to avoid a child. I have known for a long time that I do not want children. I find them annoying and they would severely limit my ability to do the things I enjoy, traveling, outdoor stuff, etc. Unfortunately for me, my ex didn't have her period when she was supposed to, and it turns out she's now pregnant. She came to me and told me she was pregnant. The first thing I did was suggest an abortion. We don't live in a state where it's legal, so I offered to pay for her flight and hotel and told her I'd be happy to come with her to get it done. I have a stable job and make good money, so wouldn't be too much of a hit for me. She works as a receptionist and doesn't make a lot, so I figured it would be better for me to pay. That's when she told me she was hoping to keep it, and that she wanted me to help her raise the kid as its father. I have no intention of being a father. Beyond just my dislike of children, I'm not ready for that. I made it very clear that I didn't want the baby, but she kept insisting that I'd have a change of heart once it's born and to just try it out. After a long exchange, I told her that if she intended to keep the baby, I would not act as a father. I broke up with her and told her that I would pay child support once it's born, but that I expect her to respect my wishes and keep the child away from me. Since then, she's been frantically texting me, begging me to come back and telling me she'd forgive me. She sent me voicemails crying. It's hurt to see, but I haven't responded. The other day, she texted me saying how she can't raise the kid alone and how I'm basically forcing her to get the abortion just by leaving. She called me an abuser and a sexist. She ended the text begging me to talk again. I certainly feel shitty. I really liked her and we had a good relationship before this, but I just don't want to be a father. I'm already bitter about the fact that I'll have to pay child support for 18 years, which will somewhat limit me financially. I also feel it isn't right for a parent who doesn't want their child to be involved. I just end up taking the pent-up anger and bitterness out on the child, who is ultimately innocent, which I feel isn't right. With all this said, I come here to ask, am I the a-hole? I certainly feel like one, but I also stand by what I did. Clarifying edits on the topic of vasectomy. I tried. I met with a doctor last year and asked about getting one, but he refused and said every doctor he knows won't do it until you're at least 30. It's a conservative state, and while I dislike the politics, I was born and raised here, so I'm still attached to the state and have never felt the urge to leave. Someone said I should have flown elsewhere to get one, and I guess they're right, but I just didn't think about that. On the topic of birth control, I bought the condoms myself, so they were fine. Whenever we were done, I'd throw used condoms in the dumpster, so I don't think she went dumpster diving. I asked her on our first date if she was taking birth control, and she said yes. I took her for her word, maybe foolish to just believe her, but if she was lying, she'd be the first I've met to lie about that. Most girls I've met are honest about it. I assume she was on the pill since that's the main birth control I know, but maybe she was on something else that I'm not educated enough on. That being said, I'll follow your advice and lawyer up, plus get a paternity test. I don't know how long that will take, but whenever I get it done, I'll update here with results. Thank you for your judgments. I've been away for a bit, but I'm catching up and trying to read what I can. I'll be checking back periodically and replying to some people. All further feedback is appreciated. Update 1. I've hired one of the better family court lawyers in my state. She has someone representing her pro bono. It has been made clear to my ex and her representative that she is not to contact me personally, and that all contact will go through my lawyer from now on. A paternity test is scheduled for next Wednesday. I don't know how long it will take to get results, but the test is happening. If the child is mine, we will go to court to determine child support payments and will set up the process for me to sign away my rights. Another clarifying edit. I was gone for a while, and while reading through some comments, I have found a topic I'd like to clarify for anyone left who still checks here and cares. At the beginning, I said I made sure to use lots of precautions. I had thought people would take away from that the idea that I had made my intention to not have kids clear at the beginning. Just wanted to make that clear. She told me she wasn't looking to have kids. I should have been more clear about this, I guess. I was under the assumption that she didn't want kids, which is why I was blindsided by her change of heart once she was actually pregnant. I understand it happens, feeling change or whatever, but for me it was a big shock. When I go to get the paternity test started, she will also have an ultrasound and we'll talk then. I'll update on Wednesday. By the way, the text will take a few days to process, so I'll also update with results. Comments where Op has replied. Comment 1. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'll try to go piece by piece. Obviously, what you've experienced is very difficult, so I'm sorry about that. I'm glad you found yourself. Opie. About my parents. Yes, they want grandkids. They have been hounding me ever since I turned 20 about when I'm going to give them grandkids. I've already told them I don't want kids, and my sister is lesbian, so they're really disappointed at this point. If they found out about the kid and that I was leaving, they would be furious, so I'm just not telling them. About how I'll feel in the future, I honestly cannot say 100%. I know that right now I 100% don't want kids, and I'm going off that feeling to assume how I'll feel in the future will be the same. Everyone lives with some level of regret, so I've come to peace with the idea that if I end up regretting this, I'll just have to move on and live with that like everyone else. If for some reason I felt regret, I wouldn't try to contact the kid. I'd just keep it to myself and keep chugging along like usual. If the kid does find me one day, I'll just be honest, depending on how I'm feeling, either I was 25 and I didn't want kids and I still don't. Sorry, or I was 25 and I thought I didn't want kids. I wasn't ready. It's been one of the biggest regrets of my life, and I'm sorry, depending on how I'm feeling. Most likely the former. I don't know what gave you the impression that I've softened to the idea of having kids. I still firmly don't want kids. I just feel pity for the child because it isn't really their fault. I don't exactly feel good about leaving the child on a moral level, but on a personal level of what is best for me, I feel very confident in leaving. It's certainly a selfish decision, but I've been very upfront with the fact that I'm a selfish person. I feel bad about it, but I'm putting myself and my own personal needs first in this situation by doing what I think is best for me. Comment 2. It's extremely unlikely then she would give up the baby once she's already got the child in her arms and goes through the process. It's extremely emotional, and we're wired to take care of our young. Chances of her giving up the baby are like 2%. She really needs to stop hoping you're all going to be a happy family someday, because this is awful for her self-esteem. She can be happy as a single mother, even if it's very hard. Does she have a family willing to help her own parents? Motherhood is a huge adjustment, and doing it with zero support is awful. PPD is not a joke. She can totally do this without you, but it would be a lot better if she had at least some support from her family. Opie. I don't know that much about her family, haven't met them, just heard bits and pieces. Apparently her dad has some drinking issues, and her mom is pretty closed off. They live in a different city too. That's about the extent of what I know, but I doubt they'd be able to help her much. Comment 3. I would consider locking down that pathway before she realizes it could lead to your mom. Blocking her before she sees your mom comment on a post and making everything go through a lawyer. By the sounds of it, if she makes contact with them, it sounds they definitely take her side. The matter is, you definitely have contact with your ex and her child because your family will be involved. I'm not saying you need them, but I feel like within 18 years they'll know, especially considering how the at-home DNA test and programs are. Either way, this doesn't change my mind on you. You're making the right call. Here and now, the ball's in your ex's court. I don't know if you're considering moving cities, but if you should, to increase the odds of you having no contact. I live near and work in a city of 1.5 million people, and I still have made contact with people I never thought I would again. Opie. I don't have a Facebook, so my mom doesn't comment on my posts, but I'll take the advice and block my ex. I have a good job, and I like my apartment a lot, so I don't plan on moving from my city. Even if I see them, I plan to get some sort of legal agreement signed through my lawyer prohibiting direct contact, so hopefully they just have to ignore me if they saw me. Update 2. Sorry for the lateness, but I got the test done and the results are in. The baby is a girl and is indeed mine. When I saw my ex, I had a talk with her. We talked about birth control, and she told me she was on birth control and had no intention of having children, but once she found out she was pregnant, she changed her mind. I believe her. She was hopeful that I would come around to that perspective. So I made it very clear that I will not be part of the child's life and gave her 3 options. Option 1. Get an abortion in any state of her choosing, and I'll pay for her to stay there for a week so she could basically take a vacation to Hawaii or NYC or LA on my dime, but I need to come with and get confirmation that she had the abortion. Option 2. Put the child up for adoption, and I'll pay for all the medical expenses that come with having a child. Option 3. Keep the child, and I pay my court-ordered child support. Sign away my parental rights, have my name taken off the birth certificate, and have absolutely zero involvement with her or the child beyond my monthly payments. It was a tough conversation, and she didn't take it well. She ended up crying for a while. She kept telling me that I would be a loving and kind dad, asking me to try fatherhood, and think about how well our relationship was going before this happened, and to imagine our future together with a daughter. I told her I'm still firmly against fatherhood, and she was devastated. She refuses to get an abortion but is scared to be a single mother at 23. Even though she wants the child, she told me that if I'm with her during the birth, see and hold the child, but still feel nothing for the baby after all that, then she will consider adoption. She also said if I change my mind about fatherhood, she will be waiting with open arms to enjoy parenthood together as a loving family and would hope I'd propose. I have made it very clear I don't want any involvement. I'm not sure what I should do since I would prefer for the baby to be put up for adoption rather than have to pay child support for 18 long years. But I also don't want to be around the baby at all or present during the birth. Advice is appreciated. Update 3. Finally back with another update. Over the past few days, I've gotten a new influx of advice. Some of this advice has been helpful or interesting. Some really good ideas were given to me, so I set up a lunch with my ex yesterday, and we had a long and productive chat. It was the first time we had talked in over a month. All our communication had been through lawyers. I decided the best way to ensure the conversation was productive was to set ground rules and make sure we were operating from reality. Both of us haven't been being realistic. I told her that I was giving up on abortion or adoption. It was what I wanted, but I already know it isn't going to happen. At this point, my ex wants the baby. I know she does, and I told her I won't be bringing up abortion or adoption to her again. It just isn't worthwhile. I have to work within reality, and at this point, that means under the assumption that she will keep the baby. I also told her it's time for her to give up on me. I made it very clear to her that I will not be getting back together with her, no matter what. Even if she aborts the baby, she will never have the happy family with me that she wants. I made it clear she needs to drop the idea because it won't happen and it makes it impossible to find any real solutions to this situation. She acknowledged that there will be no happy family between us. I think reality has finally set in for both of us. At this point, nobody is going to get what they want, so it's time to compromise. The new goal that we have agreed upon is this: provide my ex and our daughter with the support that they desperately need right now while also allowing me to have zero involvement with raising the child. In other words, I will not be involved in raising the child whatsoever, but will try to give my ex the resources she needs to make sure the child has a good life. I won't be in the delivery room, and I will never see her. I will simply provide money. My ex has $25,000 in student debt that she needs to pay off. She is only making around $60,000 a year from her job, and she will be a single mother, which means child expenses and such. By contrast, I only have around $10,000 in student debt left to pay off, and after a little over 2 years working at the company I'm at, I just got a promotion and significant pay raise, so I'm now making roughly $150,000 a year. Additionally, there is plenty of room for further growth in my field, with income growth potential all the way up to $325,000 a year, although that is still pretty far off in the future. I don't say any of this to brag, just to put our situations in perspective. I'll have all my debts paid off by the end of 2025, plus I've been setting aside money into a savings account and investment funds. What I'm trying to say is I have money, and she doesn't, so I will be making up for my lack of presence with significant financial support. I would prefer to avoid court, so I worked with my ex to find a fair monetary support system. All of what comes next is a handshake agreement between the two of us. If someone has a problem, they can go to court and determine child support that way. We talked for a while about what a fair payment system would look like, and this is what we decided on. I will pay for all of my ex's medical expenses that come with her carrying the baby, including doctor visits and hospital bills. When the baby is born, I will pay my ex $2,000 a month in child support to pay for the child's expenses. This will leave my ex with breathing room and allow her to continue paying off her student debt. We don't have exact math, but our estimate we found using phone calculators was that it would probably take her between 6 to 8 more years to pay off all her student debt. Once she has paid all her debt off, the monthly child support payment will drop to 1.1K a month. If my ex finds a man who she marries and takes on the role of a father to the child, then my child support payments will stop since he will be able to provide an extra income stream. Additionally, I will create a savings account that my ex will be able to see starting the day the baby is born. I will deposit $500 into the account. I will then deposit $500 into the account on the first day of the month every month until the girl turns 18. At that point, she will be given access to the account as a college fund. Based on the math we did, the account will have roughly $108,000 in it, not including interest. I don't know how much college will cost by then, but that should be a significant help for her to pay for college. If she decides not to go to college, I will empty the fund into my personal savings account so she only gets the money if she attends college. The fund has another condition on it, but I'll get to that later. Beyond money, my ex and the child will need emotional support. This is where my lovely sister comes in. She and her wife love kids. They had been looking into adoption for a few months now. Based on another comment I got, which I cannot find anymore, and it's driving me crazy. I think whoever wrote it deleted it, from a woman whose brother was in a similar situation. The woman decided to take on an active role and helped his ex raise the child of her own volition because she liked kids. Knowing my sister was already interested in raising a child with her wife, I reached out and asked her if she would be interested in helping my ex. She was very excited about the prospect. If my ex wouldn't have her, I asked my ex what she thought and she said yes. My sister and her wife will act as a support system for my ex. When they have time, they will help my ex with things like babysitting, giving her any advice she needs, or just being there for her to talk to. They'll also be extra family for the child, helping make things like birthdays and holidays special. This is where the second condition for the college fund comes in. As I'm sure you've noticed, my sister is lesbian. I've gotten many questions asking why I don't want my parents involved with the child. Let me answer them. My sister came out at 14. From then on, she was the scum of the earth in our house. My parents are extremely religious and very homophobic, so as soon as she came out, they hated her. No more birthdays, no more Christmas, no more family dinners. They gave her the absolute bare minimum necessities to survive and then left her alone otherwise. Obviously, it was extremely toxic. What they did was awful, and my sister has rightly gone no contact with them. My second condition for the college fund is that my ex cannot tell them about the child or let them meet her. What they want most in the world is grandchildren, and I will not give them that joy. My ex has my sister's help and support, so she doesn't need my parents. I made it clear that if I ever find out about her visiting them with the child, there will be no college fund. Finally, I want to talk about me writing a letter. Based on advice from someone whose father came back and then left, they told me not to come back but to write a letter to my daughter as closure. I don't want to come back, so I thought it was a great idea. The letter will explain why I'm not around. In this whole situation, I'm going to be truthful but try to also be gentle in the letter. The goal is to make it clear that I didn't leave because of a particular hatred towards her, but just because I never wanted to be a father in the first place. I'll also include something about how hard her mother tried to make me reconsider and how much her mother loves her. I'll end it by wishing her good luck in life. The letter will be officially notarized and will be signed by both me and my ex. When she turns 18, if she has questions about me and wants them answered, my ex will give her the letter. If the letter still can't satisfy her and she wants further answers, I've given permission for her to talk to me in person. I feel I owe it to her to answer her questions in person if that's what she needs for closure. My ex also felt strongly about wanting my name on the birth certificate, so I've agreed to that. In summary, my ex will keep the child. I will provide child support payments. I will provide a college fund on the condition that the child goes to college and my parents are never involved in the situation. My sister and her wife will help my ex by acting as an extra support system for her, and I will write a letter to my daughter explaining why I am not present that will be given to her only if she wants it as a way for her to gain closure. Full thing won't post in comments, so I'll post it in chunks. By the way, this will likely be my last update. Things are mostly figured out. Thank you for all the advice and help. Also, for anyone who hasn't seen, I'll be getting a vasectomy in Colorado in February 2024. I'd already said so, but I'll put it here too. Opie's text below the screenshots. I wrote out this whole update on Reddit and was given error messages saying it couldn't be posted. So I copy and pasted it and then screenshotted it. Sorry it's inconvenient, but this is the only way I could post this. I've split the paragraphs up and they are in order, so hopefully it isn't too annoying to read. I'll also post the full text in the comments if Reddit will allow me to. Update 4. Happy holidays to everyone. Hope you're having a nice winter. Short and boring update. I got our terms from Update 3 written up into a contract, and X has signed. Some minor changes have been made, which I will outline. Some things weren't legally enforceable, so those have remained part of a handshake agreement. The basic contract is, I have 0 visitation rights and will never be allowed visitation rights, but X also has to make active efforts to keep the child away from me. I will be paying for her medical care during the pregnancy process. We decided to adjust the payment system. I will be paying $1.5K a month in child support, and an additional $500 will be added in support for every $50K my salary increases by, currently at $150K, capping out at $500K for a max support payment at $5K a month. The handshake part of the agreement is the college fund. In exchange for not notifying my parents of their granddaughter's existence, the college fund will be monitored by my sister. I deposit $500 per month until the kid turns 18. Then the fund is made available to her if she is going to college or trade school. If she decides not to pursue higher education, she will instead receive a flat sum of $27K, roughly 1/4 of the total fund, and the remainder of the fund will go back to me. We scrapped the idea of a letter. If she wants to see me when she's 18, she'll have to come find me. I decided it's best to make it a slightly higher barrier to finding me. My sister will still be involved in helping X with her parenting of the child, and they have chosen to make the girl aware that my sister is her aunt. It's pretty much settled. X is pretty far into pregnancy at this point, and everything is worked out. Sorry to disappoint everyone who still wanted me to step up and be a present father. That is never happening. Comments where Op has replied. Commentator asks about the role Op's sister will be doing in the entire situation and the parental rights boundaries and contacts with the X/the child's mother. Opie. My sister isn't a middleman. She won't be giving me any information about the kid because she knows I don't want to hear it. She can be as involved or uninvolved as she wants, but when we are spending time together, we won't talk about the kid. I'm paying her because it's either this contract or I go to court for child support, and it's much easier to set it up through a contract than it is to do it through court, plus I feel I got decently favorable terms. I guess I could flee the country if I really didn't want to pay, but that's such a pain in the ass. I'm going to sign away my parental rights, but that really means nothing in my state. You still have to do child support if you sign your rights away. It's more just a symbolic thing to make sure I don't have to ever have custody. Sometimes courts can force a father who doesn't sign his rights away to take custody in certain situations. Also, makes it so that if something happens to my ex, the kid won't fall to me. X's ultimate goal is a happy family, so if she can find a guy she likes, the goal is to marry him. If he wants to, he can adopt the child. That's going to be his choice. If he adopts her, then my payments cease, but the handshake agreement for the college fund continues. If he doesn't adopt her, the funds continue. Beyond monthly payments, I will have 0 contact with my ex. I don't plan on showing my financials to anyone I date in the future. If I find someone I'd want to marry, then I'd come out and say what is going on, but I don't plan on disclosing it until very late into relationships. If it's a deal breaker and it ends the relationship, then I'll find someone else. I don't know what I'll say if she finds me. I'd hope she never feels the need. If she does, I'll probably just be straight up and tell her I never wanted kids to begin with. It's nothing against her specifically. I was just against the idea of ever having kids. I will not remain in contact with her if she comes to visit. The plan would be that she can talk or vent or ask as many questions as she wants and then move on for good. I don't want a sustained relationship, so it's going to be a one-time thing. Comment. If the girl knows your sister is her aunt, she will quickly figure out you are probably her dad once she's online. Opie. Hopefully my ex will be smart enough to know that kids don't belong on social media. I wasn't given a phone till I was 13, and it had heavy restrictions. I wasn't able to make any social media accounts until I was 18. For as annoying and conservative as my parents were, this was one of the very few things they ever did right. Children don't belong on social media until they are 18. If my ex doesn't raise the kid like this, that's fine, but my sister and I have already talked about this. The plan is that once she gets a social media account, my sister will share it with me, and I'll block her immediately, so she can't contact me through social media. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My husband wrote in his journal that he wished I'd die in an accident. Now he's in therapy and wants to save our family, but can I ever feel safe again? My husband Mark, 35M, and I, 32F, have been married for 6 years. We have a 3-year-old daughter, Sophie. Our relationship has had its ups and downs, but I always thought we were solid. That is until last week when I stumbled upon Mark's secret notebook. Mark and I met in college. We were both studying business, though he was a year ahead of me. I remember the first time I saw him. He was giving a presentation in our marketing class, and I was captivated by his confidence and charm. We started dating a few months later, and it felt like a whirlwind romance. We moved in together after graduation and got married 2 years later. The early years of our marriage were blissful. We both landed good jobs in the city, bought our first home, and traveled whenever we could. We talked about having kids, but we weren't in a rush. We were enjoying our time together, building our careers, and saving for the future. When I got pregnant with Sophie, it was a surprise, but a welcome one. Mark was over the moon. He painted the nursery himself, read all the parenting books he could find, and even took a few weeks off work when Sophie was born. He was the perfect doting father and husband. But things started to change when Sophie was about 6 months old. Mark's father, who he was very close to, passed away unexpectedly. It hit Mark hard. He became withdrawn and started working longer hours. I chalked it up to grief and the stress of being a new parent. I tried to be supportive, giving him space when he needed it and taking on more of the childcare responsibilities. As Sophie grew, things seemed to improve. Mark was more engaged, playing with Sophie and helping out around the house. But there was still something off. He'd have mood swings, snapping at small things and then apologizing profusely. I suggested he talk to someone about his father's death, but he always brushed it off, saying he was fine. Last week, I was cleaning our home office. Mark had been complaining about not being able to find some important documents, so I decided to organize the desk drawers. That's when I found it. A small black notebook tucked away in the back of the bottom drawer. I'd never seen it before, and curiosity got the better of me. I know I shouldn't have, but I opened it and started reading. What I found inside shook me to my core. The notebook was filled with entries spanning the last 2 years. In it, Mark wrote about how he resented me and Sophie. He complained about how having a family had ruined his life and how he wished he could just leave us. There were multiple entries where he fantasized about running away with his coworker, Jessica. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe the man I loved, the father of my child, could harbor such dark thoughts. As I read on, it only got worse. Mark wrote about how he sometimes wished I would get into an accident so he could be free. He even mentioned considering ways to make it look like an accident himself. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I thought about confronting Mark, but I was scared of how he might react. I couldn't stop thinking about all the times he'd been loving and supportive. How could that be the same person who wrote these horrible things? I decided to reach out to my best friend, Lily. We've known each other since high school, and she's always been my confidant. When I told her what I'd found, she was horrified. She insisted I come stay with her immediately. I packed a bag for Sophie and myself, told Mark I was visiting Lily for a few days, and left. Now I'm at Lily's, trying to figure out what to do next. I can't stop thinking about the notebook. Was it just a way for Mark to vent his frustrations, or were these his true feelings? The thought of going back home terrifies me, but I also feel guilty for taking Sophie away from her father. Mark has been texting and calling, asking when we're coming home. He says he misses us and can't wait to see us. It's like he's a completely different person from the one who wrote in that notebook. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to confront Mark to hear his explanation, but another part of me is scared of what might happen if I do. But if he gets angry, what if he tries to hurt me or Sophie? I keep thinking back to when Mark and I first met. He was so different then, carefree, loving, always making me laugh. I remember our first date. We went to a local fair, and he won me a stuffed bear at one of the games. I still have that bear sitting on a shelf in our bedroom. Now, looking at it makes me feel sick. I'm also worried about Sophie. She keeps asking for her daddy, and I don't know what to tell her. How do I explain the situation to a 3-year-old? Sophie and Mark have always been close. He's the one who taught her to ride her tricycle, who reads her bedtime stories every night. The thought of taking that away from her breaks my heart. But then I remember the words in that notebook. How can I trust him with our daughter after reading those things? What if his resentment towards her grows? What if he acts on those horrible thoughts? I feel like my whole world has been turned upside down. The man I thought I knew, the father of my child, suddenly feels like a stranger, a dangerous stranger. I'm considering talking to a lawyer, but I'm scared of what that might mean for our family. I always swore I'd never put Sophie through a divorce. My own parents divorced when I was young, and it was a traumatic experience. I vowed I'd never do that to my own child, but now I'm not sure if staying with Mark is safe. I need advice. Am I overreacting? Should I confront Mark? Should I take Sophie and leave for good? I feel lost and scared, and I don't know what to do next. I keep replaying moments from our relationship in my head, trying to see if there were signs I missed. Was he always this unhappy? Did I do something to make him resent us so much? I remember how excited he was when we found out I was pregnant. He went out and bought a tiny pair of baby shoes the very next day. How did we go from that to this? I'm also worried about the practical aspects of leaving. I've been a stay-at-home mom since Sophie was born. I don't have a job or any income of my own. How would I support Sophie if I left Mark? And what about our house, our savings, all the life we've built together? Part of me still loves Mark, or at least the person I thought he was. We've been through so much together. College graduations, new jobs, buying our first home, becoming parents. How can I just throw all of that away? But then I think about those words in the notebook, and I feel sick all over again. I'm scared, confused, and heartbroken. I don't know how to move forward from here. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Edit. Thank you all for your support and advice. I'm overwhelmed by the responses. To address some common questions. 1. No, Mark has never been physically abusive. 2. The notebook was hidden, not left out in the open. 3. I have taken photos of the entries as evidence. 4. I haven't told Mark I found the notebook yet. I'll update when I've decided what to do next. Update 1. It's been a week since my last post, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. It really helped me gather the courage to take action. After much deliberation, I decided to confront Mark. I knew I couldn't make any decisions without hearing his side of the story. I asked Lily to watch Sophie, and I met Mark at a public cafe near our house. When I told Mark about finding the notebook, his reaction surprised me. Instead of anger or denial, he broke down crying. He admitted to writing everything, saying he was going through a deep depression, and the notebook was his way of venting his darkest thoughts. Mark explained that he'd been struggling with the pressures of being a husband and father. He said he felt trapped and overwhelmed, and writing those horrible things was his way of releasing those feelings. He swore he never meant any of it and that he loved Sophie and me more than anything. He also revealed that he'd been having these feelings since his father died. Mark and his dad were very close, and he never really processed the grief. Instead, he buried it, and it manifested as resentment towards his new responsibilities. Mark told me about his childhood, something he'd never really opened up about before. His mother left when he was young, and his father raised him alone. He said he always worried he wouldn't be a good enough father because he didn't have a mother figure in his life. When his dad died, he felt like he lost his only parenting role model. While I was relieved that Mark didn't react violently, I couldn't shake the fear and hurt his words had caused. I told him I needed time and space to process everything. I also insisted that he start seeing a therapist to work through his issues. Mark agreed to everything. He moved out temporarily, staying with his brother. He started therapy right away and has been sending me updates after each session. He's also been writing me letters, apologizing and explaining his thoughts and feelings in a healthier way. Meanwhile, I've been focusing on Sophie and myself. I've started looking for a job, realizing how financially dependent I've become on Mark. Lily has been an incredible support, helping with Sophie and offering a listening ear whenever I need to talk. I've also been in contact with a lawyer, just to understand my options. She advised me to keep all evidence of Mark's writings and our conversations, which I've been doing. Sophie has been asking about her dad a lot. I've been telling her that Daddy is staying with Uncle Jack for a while because he's not feeling well. It breaks my heart to see her miss him, but I know I'm doing what's best for her safety and my peace of mind. Mark has been respecting my boundaries, only contacting me about Sophie or his therapy progress. He's been asking to see Sophie, and after discussing it with my lawyer, I've agreed to supervised visits at Lily's house. The first visit was hard. Sophie was overjoyed to see Mark, but I felt tense the entire time. Mark was loving with Sophie, but I couldn't help remembering the words he'd written about her. Lily was there the whole time, which helped me feel safer. I'm still unsure about our future. Part of me wants to believe Mark, to think that those writings were just dark fantasies he never meant to act on. But another part of me can't forget the fear I felt when I read those words. I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm proud of myself for standing up for Sophie and me, for not just sweeping this under the rug. But I'm also scared of what the future holds. Will I ever be able to trust Mark again? Can our family heal from this? For now, I'm focusing on being the best mom I can be to Sophie and on building a life that doesn't depend entirely on Mark. I'll update again when I have more news. Thank you all again for your support. It means more than you know. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update, and I wanted to share what's been happening. Mark has been consistent with his therapy and has been making progress. His therapist suggested we try couples counseling, which we've been doing for the past month. It's been difficult, but it's helping us communicate better. During one of our sessions, Mark revealed that he had been feeling inadequate as a father and husband long before Sophie was born. He grew up with a father who was always working and rarely present, and he was terrified of becoming the same kind of dad. Instead of talking about these fears, he internalized them, which led to his resentment. Mark also opened up about his relationship with his coworker, Jessica. He admitted that he had developed feelings for her, but he swore nothing physical ever happened. He said she represented an escape from his responsibilities, a fantasy of a simpler life. Hearing this was painful, but I appreciated his honesty. We've also had some hard conversations about our future. I realized that I had given up a lot of my independence when we got married, and I'm not willing to do that anymore. I've started a part-time job at a local bookstore, and I'm taking online classes to update my marketing skills. Mark has been supportive of this, even offering to adjust his work hours to help with Sophie. Speaking of Sophie, she's been doing okay despite the changes. We've been honest with her in an age-appropriate way, explaining that Mommy and Daddy are working on some grown-up problems. She still has regular visits with Mark, which are now unsupervised, but still at Lily's house. Last week, we had a family day at the park. It was the first time we've all been together outside of the supervised visits. It was strange at first, but seeing Mark and Sophie play together on the swings, hearing their laughter, it reminded me of the good times we've had as a family. As for our living situation, Mark is still staying with his brother. We've discussed him moving back home, but I'm not ready for that yet. I need to feel completely safe and trust him fully before I can consider it. There have been moments when I've considered ending our marriage. The pain of what I read in that notebook still haunts me sometimes. But then I see how hard Mark is working to change, how much he loves Sophie, and I wonder if we can build something new and stronger from this. I'm not making any permanent decisions yet. I'm giving myself time to heal and grow, to figure out who I am outside of being Mark's wife and Sophie's mom. It's scary, but also exciting. Last week, I went out with some friends for the first time in months. It felt good to laugh and talk about things other than my marriage problems. I realized how much I've isolated myself over the past few years, focusing solely on my family. I'm trying to reconnect with old friends and make new ones. Mark and I have also been working on co-parenting, even while living apart. We're trying to present a united front for Sophie, making decisions together about her care and upbringing. It's not always easy, but we're both committed to putting Sophie's needs first. I've been thinking a lot about what I want for my future, whether Mark is in it or not. I've always loved writing, and I've started working on a children's book in my spare time. It's just a small project for now, but it feels good to have something that's just for me. I want to thank this community again for all your support. Your advice and encouragement have been a lifeline during this difficult time. I don't know what the future holds for my family, but I feel stronger and more capable of facing it, whatever it may be. Now on to the next story. Story 8. I don't want to give up my inheritance to my manipulative brother. I, 32M, have been living with my dad ever since my mom passed away 5 years ago. It has just been the three of us in this house. Me, my dad James, and my younger brother Mark, 28M. My dad built up a very successful business over the past few decades and has accumulated a lot of wealth, including this large 5-bedroom house we live in, a vacation home, and some investment properties around town he rents out. Ever since I can remember, Mark has been obsessed with getting his hands on as much of Dad's money as possible. He has always been jealous that I was the older brother and first in line to inherit everything. A few years ago, when Mom first got sick, Mark started to care for Dad a lot. He would pamper him a lot and act like the perfect caring son. My dad liked all the attention and started favoring Mark over me. After Mom died, Mark convinced my dad to write a will leaving the majority of the estate and assets to him instead of splitting it evenly between us. I only found out when I overheard them discussing it. When I confronted them, Dad said since Mark was living here and taking care of him full-time, he deserved more than me, who has been more absent. But I have a career and a family of my own. I can't just drop everything. Mark acted distraught, saying that how could I even suggest he was manipulating Dad. He cried and said he was just trying to honor Mom's wishes. The past few months, Mark has been pushing Dad to sell some of the investment property so he can access the money now rather than waiting until Dad passes. He keeps claiming they need money to cover Dad's medical expenses. I'm 99% sure there's no major expenses and Mark just wants to cash out and prevent me from inheriting anything. Dad is hesitant, but I think Mark is wearing him down. So here is where I might be I told my dad that either he tears up the will leaving everything to Mark or I will take this to court and sue after he passes. Dad was furious, said I was trying to bully him for money just like Mark, but I honestly feel wronged here. I deserve an equal share and now I have to resort to threats just to fight for what should be rightfully mine. This has caused a huge split in the family. Mark is not talking to me ever since I spoke with Dad. Dad is putting the guilt on me every chance he gets, saying I'm stressing him into an early grave. I don't think I should have to sit back and let my brother swindle me out of my inheritance, but my wife has been questioning if I'm handling this the right way. Now I'm starting to second-guess myself. So Reddit, am I the here? Should I try to make amends with Dad and Mark, or continue fighting for what I believe is fair? Update 1. I asked my wife to secretly talk to Mark and find out his real intentions. Wow, I did not expect my last post to blow up like that. I want to thank everyone who commented and gave their verdict on the situation with my dad and brother. After reading through the majority opinions and seeing I was ruled NTA, I sat with my wife, Jane, to have a serious discussion. I asked if she could try talking to my brother, Mark, one-on-one to get a better read on what's really going on. Jane and Mark have always gotten along well. I was hoping he would open up more to her instead of keeping up the act he puts on for me and my dad. Jane wasn't thrilled with the idea, saying it would put her in an awkward position, but she reluctantly agreed. So yesterday, Jane pulled him aside into the kitchen while I distracted my dad in the living room. I tried to eavesdrop as best I could. Jane started off lightly, thanking Mark again for helping out Dad. Mark played the part of humble caretaker, saying it was the least he could do after all Dad has done for him over the years. Then Jane encouraged Mark to be the bigger person and try to work things out. Mark immediately got defensive, insisting he already was compromising by accepting only 60% of assets in the will. He claimed my jealous behavior was what drew a line in our family, saying ever since we were kids, I always wanted whatever Mark had. He said his priority was ensuring Dad is comfortable and medically cared for in his last years, while my priority was greed. I had to control myself from barging in. Jane sensed the tension and quickly moved the conversation along. She asked why now was the right time to sell investment properties and access Dad's money. Mark launched into a sob story about how expensive round-the-clock in-home care is for elderly patients like Dad. He said things like changing diapers, bathing, cooking are out of his scope of abilities. I was surprised. Our Dad does not need in-home care. He's fully capable of caring for himself. This was clearly a ploy by Mark to justify taking the inheritance money 10+ years sooner than he's supposed to. Jane pretended to sympathize with the challenges of caregiving and asked if Mark had considered any affordable alternatives, like a part-time nurse or moving Dad to an assisted living facility. Mark scoffed at the idea, insisting no stranger could provide the same level of love and affection that he does. He said the only solution is to bring in more round-the-clock caregivers, which could cost upwards of $10,000 per month. Of course, money is no object when it comes to family, according to Mark. But selling 3 or 4 of the investment properties would give them the cash in hand to cover expenses for the next few years. To wrap up the pretense, she asked if Mark had any intentions of using the inheritance money for himself. Maybe take a vacation or buy a new car or house. Mark showed that he was offended, saying he couldn't believe Jane sees him as so selfish when all he's doing is honoring their late mother's wishes. Jane apologized, and Mark excused himself, leaving me angry in the next room. As soon as Mark left, Jane came over and squeezed my shoulder, giving me a knowing look that confirmed Mark was absolutely up to no good. We discussed what she learned, and both agreed Mark is determined to get his hands on as much money as possible, as soon as possible. Jane offered to speak to my dad directly to expose Mark's lies about in-home care costs, but I asked her to hold off for now. I know this would crush my dad to learn one son is deceiving him just out of greed. For now, Jane and I have agreed not to tell Dad and to keep a close eye on Mark going forward. I'll record any interactions with Mark about the will or inheritance money to gather evidence of his intentions. My next move will be sitting down again with Dad and clearly explaining that I only want split inheritance and that hiring any caregivers or selling property should be a joint decision between us. I am hopeful he will hear me out and see reason, but if not, and Mark manages to sell those properties, I will take this to court. I decided to meet with a lawyer next week to understand my options if this escalates into a legal battle. I pray it doesn't come to that, but with Mark's schemes, I need to prepare for the worst. Thanks again for all the support and opinions on my original post. I will be sure to provide an update on if meeting Dad again goes well or if this continues spiraling out of control. Wish me luck. Update 2. Things got heated when I confronted Dad again about the inheritance. Welcome back for another installment in this ongoing saga. When we left off, my wife Jane had secretly spoken to my manipulative brother, Mark, and confirmed he is indeed scheming to cash out my dad's assets for himself, under the guise of paying for in-home care. After much thought, I decided my next step would be sitting down with my dad again to clearly explain why evenly splitting the inheritance between me and Mark is the right thing to do. I wanted to talk to Dad one more time before bringing in the lawyers. So yesterday evening, I asked Dad if we could talk in private after dinner. I figured it was best to do this one-on-one without Mark around. Dad reluctantly agreed, and we stepped into his home office to chat. I started off by thanking Dad for taking the time to hear me out. I told him I have been thinking about the will a lot and I think I have a negotiation that will keep the family peace while ensuring everyone gets their fair share. As calmly as I could, I explained that the best path forward is for Dad to divide the assets and inheritance evenly between his 2 sons, who he loves equally. I made sure not to mention any accusations about Mark at first, just focusing on what I felt was the reasonable solution. Dad immediately got defensive, saying I clearly don't respect that this is his money, his choice what to do with it. He accused me of acting entitled to something that isn't even mine yet. I explained this isn't about the money, but more about fairness, and I felt it was unfair to change a lifetime of tradition and leave one brother unreasonably more than the other. Dad countered, saying it was his right to decide who deserves more based on who selflessly cares for him in his elderly years. I resisted the urge to say that Mark's caretaking is an act to get the money. Trying to remain calm, I asked Dad to consider how he would feel if he were in my shoes. If his dying father left him less than his sibling, how hurt and betrayed he might feel. For a minute I thought Dad got my point, as he fell silent and seemed to be considering my words. But then he shook his head, insisting he was sorry I felt hurt, but it was his money and his choice. At this point, I got impatient. I told Dad there was something needed to know about Mark's intentions and behavior around the inheritance money. I started to explain what Jane uncovered about Mark exaggerating medical costs and trying to sell properties right away just to take the money, but Dad cut me off immediately. He raised his voice, accusing me of spreading hateful lies about poor Mark, who has been nothing but selfless and caring through these difficult times. Dad said he sees this as my last-ditch attempt to manipulate him after I already failed to bully him for money. We were both standing at this point, shouting over each other. Dad said he refused to be stressed any longer by greedy sons fighting over their inheritance like vultures. He said he would rather donate it all to charity than let this continue. In the heat of the moment, I angrily told Dad that if he went through with essentially disinheriting his eldest son, then he was dead to me. I know I shouldn't have said it, but I just couldn't believe he was still siding with Mark after all he's done. Dad looked at me with such disappointment and fury. He told me to get out of his house immediately if that's how I was going to behave. So I grabbed my keys and wallet and left without another word, fuming with anger and frustration. That all went down about 24 hours ago, and Dad and I still haven't spoken since. Jane says I should go back and apologize for the hurtful things I said before the gap worsens, but honestly, I'm hesitant to make the first move. Mark has clearly turned my own father against me, and I don't know if this relationship can be saved at this point. I am starting to think my only option left is legal action. With the evidence Jane provided and a good lawyer, maybe I have a chance at contesting the will after my dad passes away and exposing Mark's manipulation. I wanted to avoid dragging this into court, but if Dad refuses to see Mark's true colors and disregards my fair claim as eldest son, then I don't see any other choice. Please let me know your thoughts on if I should try to make amends with Dad soon or start talking to lawyers about fighting the will. I could really use some perspective right now before taking any permanent actions I might regret. Update 3. Jane secretly recorded Mark drunkenly confessing his true intentions. I'm back with the latest installment in this inheritance drop. Thank you for all the suggestions on how to reconcile with my dad after our huge fight. Some of you brought up an excellent point. Try gathering certain evidence of Mark's lies first. Well, you will be happy to know my amazing wife, Jane, took that advice to heart, and she managed to get a recording of Mark admitting the truth when he was drunk. After my heated argument with Dad, Jane convinced me to let things cool off for a week before trying to make amends. In the meantime, she thought about a risky plan. She invited Mark over for dinner and drinks one night, while Dad was at a neighbor's house. I hid a friend's place so it would just be Jane and Mark. Jane made Mark his favorite meal and gave him compliments about what a doing selfless son he is to Dad. Mark loved it. After drinking a couple of bottles of wine, Jane suggested they unwind in the hot tub. Mark was plenty eager to see my wife in a swimsuit. Little did he know, Jane wore a one-piece and had her phone recording in her pocket. Out in the hot tub, Jane really laid it on thick, tearfully telling Mark she wished she had a caring man like him. That set drunk Mark off. He happily told about how easy it was to drive a wedge between me and Dad. Mark said Dad feels so guilty about cheating me out of inheritance. He will now do anything to avoid conflict or stress. Jane urged Mark on, asking if selling investment property soon was part of his strategy. Mark laughed and gave the most surprising speech Jane could have hoped for. Mark apparently has buddies lined up, ready to buy the properties 25 to 50% under market value. Mark will get cash kickbacks under the table. He plans to pull this scheme with each property before Dad dies, so they can't be passed down to me. The in-home care sob story was totally fake. Mark admitted the only care he plans to hire is for lavish vacations around the world with his new fortune before settling into the big house once Dad's gone. By this point, Jane played it cool while Mark rambled on. Jane finally faked a headache so Mark would leave quickly without continuing their chat alone. Once Mark was gone, Jane ran over to where I was staying. We listened to the recording and I nearly cried hearing Mark methodically lay out how he's screwing me over. Jane and I both agreed we couldn't waste another second before showing this to Dad. First thing in the morning, we went over and asked Dad to meet us in his office without Mark. Dad was cold when he saw me, but we convinced him this was something he needed to hear. Though skeptical at first, once we played the recording, Dad's face went white as a sheet as he heard Mark's true colors. My heart broke seeing Dad's illusion of the perfect son shattered. He put his face in his hands and asked through tears where he went wrong with Mark. It was so painful for us all. After discussing next steps for several hours, Dad and I agreed. 1. Dad will restore the will to split everything 50-50. 2. We'll have a family lawyer send Mark official notice he's been removed from the will with a recording of his evidence. 3. Dad will consult his real estate lawyer about legal action against Mark for his kickback scheme. 4. We'll change all passwords/locks so Mark can't access accounts or the home. 5. If Mark harasses us, we will pursue restraining orders. 6. Most importantly, Dad and I will enter family therapy together while our relationship is in bits. I am hopeful we can restore trust and heal with time. I think therapy will allow us to grieve losing the Mark we thought we knew and create healthier family dynamics moving forward. Jane is my absolute rock for having the courage and brilliance to expose Mark's treachery when I couldn't. Dad is also beyond grateful to her for opening his eyes before Mark could swindle more money. This experience has certainly shown me you can't choose your relatives, only your actions. I innocently gave Mark the benefit of the doubt as family, which nearly cost me everything. While the legal and emotional battles ahead won't be easy, at least we have the truth on our side. I will be sure to provide another update when the lawyers get involved. Thank you again for all the encouragement and support during this painful ordeal. Stay tuned for the next installment once we deliver the news to Mark and move forward with undoing his diabolical scheming. Wish us luck. Now on to the next story. Story 9. I'm trying to escape my crazy father and family. I need help. I'm typing this in a mix of fear and nerves. I am the youngest, 22, of 5 kids. M30, M28, F28, twins, and F25. My parents are heavily religious and we live in Utah. Growing up, everything had to be done perfectly. It didn't matter if it was grades, looks, social activities, or even friends. I'm different from my siblings, as I was never interested in the maths and science like they were. I've always been the artist, the painter. I remember once when I was 13, I made a painting of a dove in a snowy field and won first in the competition. I told my parents, who got angry that I had wasted my time with something so worthless, when I should have been using the time to study. I still had A's in every class. My mother won't even say more than a few words to me. She's always seems like she hates me and I don't understand. Father burned the painting to remind me of what was truly important, before taking all of my art supplies until I showed more responsibility with my time. It's been like this as long as I can remember. I work full-time and have since I was 15 at McDonald's, dashing every bit of money I could. Father took half my checks as tithing to help teach me what being an adult was like. I applied to several colleges but was told by my parents that they would not be helping me with tuition as they did for my siblings because they thought sending me to college would just be a waste of money. So I got angry. I am so tired of being the black sheep just because I like the arts more than maths and science. And then, I heard them talking when I got up in the middle of the night about the per man they'd found who was willing to take me in through our church. I am terrified and so I'm leaving. I've got some money saved up, a good amount, and I'm leaving the country. I found a job that lets me work remote doing freelance design work, and I've had my passport since I was a kid because of our family vacations overseas. I'm taking nothing other than a change of clothes, my laptop, and important documents I took out of my father's office. I booked a flight that leaves in 5 hours and I'm never coming back. I'm not even going to take my phone since I'd need to get a new number anyway. My best friend, God bless her, had been the one booking things and getting everything ready since I couldn't tip off my parents. She's also smuggled some of my more important things I can't take to hold on to for me. She's parking down the street and I'll leave with my smallest suitcase to meet her. I don't know how they'll take this. I'm terrified they'll find a way to drag me back or track me down. They went to bed over an hour ago, but I'm too anxious to sleep. I don't know if I'll have any updates, but I just hope they don't stop me. Update 1. Wow. So much has been happening lately that it's kept my head on a swivel constantly. I'll start with a good part of the update before moving on to the less happy bits. So, I was advised to remove the location destination from my post. So all I will say is that I'm in South Africa right now and it's amazing. The food is astonishing, and a poster here messaged me to recommend that I try bunny chow, which is actual authentic curry in a bread bowl. It was phenomenal. I got to chatting with one of the hotel staff. She's about my age and we really hit it off. She went with me to a local shopping center to get some new and better clothes. At least I'm used to wearing dresses, so that doesn't faze me, and they're very lightweight and breathable unlike a lot of US dress fabrics. She also told me to always shake out my shoes every morning just in case. I've started apartment hunting and it's well within my budget, like super low compared to how sky-high it is in the US. It's honestly jaw-dropping, like $81 for a studio apartment with a loft and kitchenette. So yeah, housing won't be an issue, and it is a bit odd to be house shopping for myself when I've always lived with my parents. Now, on to the less pleasant bits. I finally opened the emails, deciding it was best to probably get it over with. My father's email was filled with anger. There is no other way to put it. He said that by taking off irresponsibly like I did, cost them the friendship of someone they'd planned on introducing to me. He never admitted that it was the 53-year-old that basically sold me to. Father stated that because of the social relations that had been damaged and impacted by my action, I owe them approximately $85,000 in reparations. He also claims that he will be taking me to court if I don't pay it in full within 30 days and return home, as I obviously cannot be trusted. I plan to ignore that as I believe him to be bluffing. He ended his email/rant with, "You belong to me and I won't tolerate such defiance when we've put a roof over your head and taken care of you for your entire life. You were never the child we expected. It's time you make up for your deficiencies. I expect you home within the next 2 weeks." Yeah, no. My siblings were basically copies of my father's email, admonishing me for throwing the efforts of our parents in their faces before running off like a coward unwilling to face the fallout of my actions. I skimmed them honestly before just deleting them. There's nothing I didn't expect. However, my sister-in-law, she's married to my eldest brother, sent her own email before asking me not to reply as she would be deleting every sign she sent it from her end. She congratulated me on stepping out on my own and getting away from my parents and their demands. She said that she herself hadn't been strong-willed enough to stand up to her parents when they basically betrothed her to my brother, which makes sense as I remember that they met and then married within 6 months, and even then I thought that was a bit strange. She pleaded with me not to return and not to reply. That was it. It was a bit unnerving, honestly, as I do believe her and I'm sad that she is stuck the way she is. The last email was from my best friend. She said that the morning after I flew out, my parents had been on their doorstep demanding to see me. Apparently, they believed I was hiding with her. They refused to leave, screaming for me to stop pretending I wasn't there. It caused enough of a scene that the police were called, but they only talked to my parents briefly and let them leave. It really angered my friend who'd wanted them arrested for threats and trespassing. The police only claimed that there wasn't a pattern of behavior that would warrant them being arrested and charged before just leaving. She didn't know when they realized I wasn't there at her house, but they didn't come back, thankfully. However, word has spread of me fleeing the safety of my parents' home, and how they wanted me to return as they were concerned and fearful of what may happen with me out on the streets alone. The church ward has actually done searches of the area trying to find me. I don't know what they'll do from here, but they have no idea I left the country, let alone the state. My friend has no plans to say anything, and neither do I. As far as I'm concerned right now, they can live with that state of wondering for the rest of eternity. I don't think I will renounce my US citizenship, as there may come a day when I need it, and it's better to be safe than sorry, but I have full plan to gain dual citizenship as soon as I'm able to. That's it for now. No other parts yet, but if anything changes I'll let you know. I want to thank you all for your comments and private messages. It feels like I've got friends and family on my side, and I cannot tell you how much that means to me. Truly, thank you, all of you. Update 2. So much advice and support from everyone. I cannot thank you all enough. I thought with all the comments and questions, I thought I'd answer here and explain what's happened since my last post. Ironically, my use of maths instead of just math comes from my mother, who is British and met my father in England when they were 22. So, I do come by it naturally, and my siblings say it that way as well. I thank you for drawing my attention to the TT videos broadcasting my story, though why they changed the name I don't know. I did report them, but we'll have to see if they ever pull the videos down, or at least edit them. Second, is people questioning why I chose South Africa and Johannesburg of all places because of how dangerous it can be. I do understand the risks, but there is nowhere on this planet that is inherently danger-free. Africa is massive and incredibly diverse. Finding someone would be very difficult, and because those videos got so much attention, I have left Johannesburg sadly. I'm very far, though obviously still in Africa. The area I'm in now is incredibly safe and came highly recommended by several people. Settling here will be very comfortable, and the people are wonderful. I may even attend the university here and get a degree. I haven't replied to the emails, but I have saved them and printed copies, and laminating them just in case. I will not be renouncing my U.S. citizenship, and my passport is good for another 8 years. I don't hate religion regardless of what it is. In my eyes, a person's relationship with God is incredibly personal. If a person connects with him via camping or walks, long drives, listening to music, acts of service, that's their choice, and it's just as valid, in my opinion, as sitting in a pew, is possibly more, as they're honest with themselves instead of just putting on a false facade for the public eye. I plan on ignoring any further emails from my family other than printing them out just in case. They've made several phone calls to my friend who's had fun with them. The first time, your father called yelling that I hand you over. I pretended to be Cow and gave him your location. Took him to a strip club. He came back screaming at how I had embarrassed him. I just hung up on him honestly. She did that each time they called, giving a different location each time. Her favorite was sending my parents to a nudist retreat. My mother passed out apparently. My friend is looking to move and eventually plans to join me, but will jump around a bit so that they don't follow her to me. I did finally read my uncle's email, but it was just a copy of my father's with the added comment that he and his fellow cops would be looking for me to bring me home safe before I got myself in trouble and hurt. I am being watchful, and I know better than to wander into dark alleyways and abandoned places. That's all I've got for now. If anything changes, I'll let you all know. It's heartwarming seeing and reading how many people are on my side and in my corner. I've actually begun printing out everyone's messages and comments to put in a binder I can look back on later. Truly thank you all. I mean it. Update 3. Hello everyone. It's been a while since my last update, and a few things have happened that I was told by my friend that I needed to share since everyone was still clearly rooting for me. I have settled in a bit here and am now enjoying the fun of paperwork. Oh, so much paperwork. I have secured an apartment, and while it's 2 bedrooms, one is for my friend when she comes to join me. I've made a few acquaintances here locally, and I'm beginning to stand on my own a bit. My biggest challenge has been dealing with feeling uncomfortable because I don't know all of those unspoken rules the way I did in the US. As such, I'm constantly second-guessing myself, but hopefully that will fade with time. So, family. My family has learned I left the state. How they did, I'm not sure. They do, however, seem convinced that I am still in the continental US. My friend works as a cartoonist, and while she doesn't make a large amount of money, she makes more than enough to live comfortably. She's getting ready to leave herself and decided to send my parents a farewell gift. She didn't tell me about this until just a little bit ago. She spent a few hours carefully drawing my parents as they visited each location she sent them to, including their reactions, and all scenes were ended with the phrase, Abbott, Abbott, Abbott. That's all, folks. Sadly, while I've never seen Looney Tunes as she named it, she said she portrayed my dad as similar to a coyote. I'm still not 100% sure what that means, but she said everyone else would before then, ordering me to watch it, maybe one day. She should be joining me around October 9th after country hopping several times. All the things she hasn't sold are in a secured storage unit, including the things she's been holding for me. The biggest revelation came after my father. Well, he had a meltdown. Apparently, after I never responded to him, he got into a fight with my mother in church, and many things were said. Among those, according to several, that my mother had cheated on my father, which, well, led to me, which is why she never liked me, I guess, as I just reminded her of her mistakes. My father took her back in spite of that, but, well, there it is. It caused a big stir in the ward and meetings were held, though I obviously don't know what was said or done. I may never know honestly. I am trying to move on and am even contemplating getting a tattoo. Part of me really wants to, while another points out that if I change enough and father finds me, he won't want me. Then that's all really for now. I'm not sure if I'll have anything else to share, but if anything happens, I'll let you all know. Thank you for all the messages and comments. I do read them all, and it means more than you'll ever know. Final update. Hello everyone. Sorry this update has taken so long. Once my friend arrived, things got really hectic. She's been settling and well, and it has been a huge relief to have her here with me as it gives me a sense of security that I didn't really have before. We've been taking time to build new routines, finding a new normal, I guess, that works for us both. It's been a challenge, but at the same time, everything has been so different one day to the next that it's kept the days from seeming boring or blurring together. One of the elderly neighbors I've been talking to a lot since I moved here has also invited the both of us to spend Christmas with her and her family. They're going to have a goat as the main meat, which is different, but I'm excited to try it. It's odd to not see Christmas trees everywhere, but that's still a new thing. So it's not common here, but her granddaughter is teaching my friend, and some of the dances we'll be doing as Christmas celebrations here are more like a festive party and gathering rather than a slow day spent with just gifts. It's odd, as even in my family we'd only ever be given 3 gifts, one for our body, one for the mind, and the last for the soul, to honor the Trinity according to my parents. Last year, I think I received a new Sunday dress, a set of physics textbooks, and a new log journal for my scripture reading. After gift openings, we'd each retreat to our rooms and remain there until dinner was ready, usually made by Mother and myself. Yet here, they're planning on doing our hair, having dances and music with food and laughter. Gifts are still given, obviously, but the day is spent more with those around you than on material things. I'm excited. I've decided to ignore my family for now. I've gotten a lot of questions on why I didn't report them or confront them, and the answer is easy and may seem a bit childish, but the thought of facing them like that terrifies me. I don't want to be around them, talk to them, or think about them. I'm genuinely scared that trying to bring justice will only drag me right back into the mess I ran from. I'm 22 and yet I'm terrified of my own family. So that's why I'm not doing anything to them. I just want to pretend, even if only for a bit, that my life isn't messed up and freakish, if that makes any sense at all. I don't know where I will be a year from now, but somehow the thought doesn't worry me. I'm happy, genuinely happy, and excited to see where things will go from here. Thank you everyone, really, I mean it. Looking back, it's mind-blowing how things have changed, and there is still so much I get to do. I know there are people here from all over the world. I'd love to hear your holiday traditions. I don't care if it's not Christmas. I just love to hear what you do this time of year and your traditions. I'm trying to figure out my new normal and what I like, so I'd love any suggestions. Be it food, music, dances, anything really. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.